The forest was too quiet when I cut the engine. Not normal quiet, not peaceful quiet. It was the kind that feels like something stopped the world mid-breath. I stayed inside the Jeep for a few seconds, hands still on the key, listening. Nothing moved outside. No birds, no wind brushing the trees. Even the tires seemed too loud when they cooled down. Then I saw it. A narrow dirt path disappearing into thick pine trees, and at the end of that path, barely visible through the branches, sat the cabin. Blackburn cabin. It looked smaller than the official report photos. Older too, like it had shrunk with time instead of decaying normally. I checked my assignment sheet again. Environmental decay documentation. Abandoned structure. No known occupants for 12 plus years. No mention of anything unusual. But the moment I looked back up at the cabin, something didn't match the report. There were footprints in the mud. Fresh ones. I froze. They led from the tree line straight to the cabin door. My first thought was simple. Someone got here before me. But that didn't make sense. The road behind me was closed for kilometers. I had passed 3 warning signs, 2 broken gates, and 1 ranger station that looked like it hadn't been used in years. So who came here? I stepped out of the Jeep anyway. The air hit me immediately, cold, damp, heavy. It smelled like wet wood and something older underneath it, like soil that had been disturbed too many times. My boots sank slightly into the ground as I walked closer. The footprints became clearer. Not animal, not random. Human. Barely visible toe marks, heel pressure, like someone had walked slowly, carefully, and then stopped at the cabin door. That was the part that made my stomach tighten, because there were no return steps. I looked up at the cabin again. The door was closed, but not locked. That's what I noticed next. The latch was hanging slightly open, swinging just a little in the windless air. Open doors in abandoned places usually mean animals. But animals don't leave perfect human footprints. I took out my recorder. Standard procedure. Audio log, visual log, environmental notes. My voice sounded too normal when I spoke. Site arrival, Blackburn cabin, no visible structural collapse. Door appears unlocked. Fresh footprints observed leading to entrance. I stopped recording for a second, because I realized something else. There were no footprints leaving the cabin, only going in. A slow pressure built behind my eyes. Not fear yet, something more like confusion trying to become fear. I told myself it was a mistake. Maybe I missed something. Maybe wind erased them going out. But even as I thought it, I knew it wasn't true. The mud was too fresh. I stepped closer to the door. One more thing hit me then. The cabin wasn't silent. Not fully. There was a soft sound coming from inside. Like something shifting. Very faint, almost like wood settling. Or breathing that didn't belong to the air outside. I stopped again. That was the first moment I considered turning around. But then I remembered the assignment. Government project, paid observation, 1-night stay if needed. Just data collection. No danger mentioned anywhere in the file. So I pushed the door. It opened without resistance. Inside, the air changed instantly. Warmer, stale, like it had been held in place for a long time and didn't want to leave. My flashlight cut through the darkness. Old wooden table, broken chair, shelves with dust so thick it looked like fabric. Normal abandoned cabin. Almost normal. But then I saw the second thing that didn't belong. A wet trail on the floor. Not mud from outside. Something darker. Dragged from the entrance, deeper into the cabin. My throat tightened without permission. I didn't step in right away. Instead, I followed the trail with my light. It led to the hallway. and stopped at a closed door. I didn't remember seeing that door in the photos. That was my first open loop in my mind. Had the layout changed? I checked my folder again quickly. The printed floor plan showed a single-room cabin with a small storage corner. No hallway. No second door. I lowered the folder slowly. The cabin was not the same as the one in my documents. I told myself maybe the blueprint was outdated. But that explanation didn't sit right either. Because as I stood there, I heard something again. A soft inhale from behind the closed door. My hand tightened around the flashlight. I wasn't breathing properly anymore. I forced myself to speak, even though no one would hear me. "Hello." Silence answered immediately. But it wasn't empty silence. It felt attentive, like the cabin was waiting for me to say something else. I stepped inside fully. One step, then another. The floor creaked under my weight, and I noticed something strange. The sound echoed twice. Not once. Like there was a second empty space, repeating it somewhere else in the cabin. That should not have been possible. I paused. That was the second open loop forming in my head. What was behind that door? And why did the cabin sound like it had two versions of itself? I moved closer to the hallway. The wet trail became clearer the nearer I got. It wasn't random anymore. It was intentional. Like something had been pulled backward instead of walking. My flashlight flickered once. Just once. But enough for my chest to tighten. When it steadied again, I noticed something new on the wall. Scratches. Not deep, not violent. Measured. Like someone had been counting. 1, 2, 3. Then stopping. Then starting again. My skin prickled. I didn't understand why counting would be carved into a wall in an abandoned cabin, unless someone had been stuck here long enough to need it, or long enough to lose track. I reached the hallway. The air here felt tighter, thicker, like the cabin didn't want me moving forward anymore. I placed my hand on the door. It was cold, too cold for something inside a warm space. My fingers hesitated for a second. Then I pushed. The door didn't open fully. Just a small crack. Enough for my light to slip in. And what I saw made my body stop before my mind could fully process it. The room was empty. Almost. Except for one thing. Footprints. Fresh ones. Leading from inside the room back toward me. My breath caught, because that meant something impossible. Whatever made those footprints was now facing me, from inside the room. But I had seen no one enter. No sound. No movement. Just silence and dust and pressure in the air. I took one slow step back. Then another. And that's when I heard it clearly for the first time. A whisper. Not from the room. Not from outside. From the walls. Very soft. Very close. Like the cabin itself was speaking, without opening its mouth. And it said something I didn't fully understand at first. But it sounded like my name. The flashlight flickered again. Longer this time. When it stabilized, the footprints in the room were gone. Completely erased. Like they had never been there. I stood still, staring at the empty floor. My brain tried to rebuild logic. Wind, dust, light, angle. But none of it worked. Because I knew what I saw. And worse, I knew something had seen me seeing it. Behind me, the cabin creaked again. Not randomly. Not naturally. Like something had shifted its attention. Slowly, toward the hallway where I was standing. And in that moment, I realized the worst part wasn't the footprints. It was the fact that I had arrived late to this place. Whatever was here had already been waiting, and I wasn't the first person it had noticed. Just the next one it decided to let inside. The first thing I noticed was the breathing. Not mine. Not inside the cabin. Outside. Slow, steady. Close enough that I stopped mid-step without even realizing it. I was standing in the hallway when it started, still staring at the empty room with the erased footprints. My flashlight was pointed forward, but my body had already gone cold in a different direction, toward the wall behind me. Because that's where it came from. A soft inhale, then a pause, then an exhale that didn't match any animal I knew. I didn't move, not because I was brave, because my brain couldn't decide what moving meant anymore. Then my recorder clicked on by itself. That should not have happened. I remember clearly turning it off earlier. I always do. Battery saving, routine habit. But now it was on. And it was recording. A faint red light blinked in my hand like it had decided to wake up without me. The breathing outside continued. Slow, measured. Too controlled to be wind. Too patient to be an animal. I lowered my flashlight slightly and whispered without meaning to. Hello. The word disappeared into the cabin like it was swallowed. No echo. No reply. Just that breathing again. Closer. I took one step back into the main room. The floor creaked under me, and instantly the breathing paused, like it was listening to the sound I made. That's when I noticed something strange. My recorder wasn't just recording. It was playing something back. Very faint. A second audio layer under the live feed. I raised it closer to my ear. At first it sounded like static. Then voices started forming inside the static. Not words I understood. Just rhythm. Breath, breath, breath. And then silence between them. My throat tightened. I checked the display. File name, Night Log 1. I had not created that file. I swear I had not. A slow pressure started building in my chest. Not fear yet, something worse. Confusion that couldn't settle. I turned toward the cabin door. It was still slightly open. The forest outside looked darker than before, like the trees had moved closer while I wasn't looking. And then I heard it again. The breathing. Outside the door. Same rhythm. Same distance. But now it matched the audio playing in my recorder. Perfectly. I froze again. There was no way that was random. No way sound from outside was syncing with a corrupted file inside my device. Unless I stopped that thought before it finished forming, because I didn't like where it went. I slowly pressed play on the recording. My own voice filled the cabin, but not from now, from earlier, from a moment I didn't remember recording. Arrival confirmed. Cabin is stable, no visible threats. My stomach tightened. I remember saying something similar earlier, but not exactly that. The recording continued. The strange footprints observed. No return path, possible wildlife interference. I shook my head slightly. No, that part I did say, but I never recorded it in this tone. My voice in the audio sounded calmer, too controlled, like I was reading instead of reacting. Then the recording changed. A new layer came in. My voice again, but slower, tired, breathing outside cabin, not animal. I stopped breathing for a second, because I had not said that yet. That hadn't happened when I was recording, but it was in the file. And then, right on cue, the breathing outside continued, exactly matching the timestamp of the audio. I backed away from the door without thinking. My heel hit the wall behind me. The cabin felt smaller than before, like the walls had shifted inward slightly while I wasn't paying attention. I checked my recorder again. Now there were multiple files. Night log 1, night log 2, night log 3. I had only been here for maybe 2 hours. That didn't make sense. I opened night log 2. My voice again, but weaker this time, more uncertain. I think it is circling the cabin. I looked up instantly. The cabin window was right beside me. I turned slowly. Outside between the trees, something darker than shadow moved. Not fast, not sudden, just present, like it had been there the whole time and only now decided to become noticeable. The breathing came from that direction. Still slow, still controlled, but now I could feel it differently. Not in my ears, in my body, like the cabin itself was inhaling with it. My hand started shaking slightly. I pressed stop on the recorder. Silence returned. For half a second, I thought it worked. Then, a breath came from inside the cabin, right behind me. I turned so fast my flashlight beam cut across the room like a blade. Nothing. No one. Just dust and wood and darkness behaving normally again. But my body didn't believe it, because I felt it. That inhale had been too close, too real. I stepped toward the center of the room, trying to reset my mind. Think logically. Think like a field researcher. Wind, sound distortion, echo reflection. But every explanation collapsed the moment I heard it again. Breathing. Outside. Now joined by something else. A faint second rhythm. Like another set of lungs trying to copy the first one, but failing slightly. My recorder turned itself back on. I didn't touch it. Night log 3 opened automatically. My voice again. But now I sounded different. Afraid. It is learning timing. My mouth went dry. Learning. That wasn't scientific language. That wasn't me. The recording continued. Do not match breathing patterns. Then a pause. Too long. Too intentional. And then my voice whispered something I did not want to hear. It is counting with me. I stepped back instinctively. My heel hit something. The wooden table. I hadn't even noticed I moved that far. The cabin felt like it was rearranging me inside it without permission. The breathing outside changed. It slowed, matched my movement. I realized something horrifying then. I had been breathing too, and it was matching me back. My chest tightened. I tried to stop, but the moment I focused on my breath, it became louder in my head. Too loud, like it wasn't mine anymore, like it was being echoed inside me. I forced myself to sit down on the edge of the table. My hands pressed against the wood. It was cold, too cold for a cabin that had been closed for years. And that's when I noticed it. Scratch marks under my fingers. Fresh, not old decay. Recent pressure. Numbers carved into the wood. 1, 2, 3. I pulled my hand back instantly. My heart started beating faster, and the breathing outside sped up slightly too. Not much, just enough for me to notice. I stood again, this time slower, careful, like any sudden movement would be answered. The cabin was not empty. It was participating. I walked toward the window again. The forest outside was darker than before, and closer. The trees felt like they had shifted forward by inches. not physically moving, but emotionally closer. The breathing came again, right at the edge of the glass. I raised my flashlight. Nothing. Then I lowered it. Still nothing, but I could feel it there. Watching, matching, counting. That's when my recorder played one last line without warning. My voice, soft, almost calm. If it reaches 10, it will know I am awake. I stopped completely. 10. My mind latched onto that instantly. What 10? 10 breaths, 10 cycles, 10 seconds. Before I could decide, the breathing outside slowed again. And I realized something worse. I had already lost count. I didn't know when it started, or how many there had been. Only that it was still going, still matching, still learning. And somewhere in the dark, outside the cabin, something was counting with me perfectly, without missing a single breath. 3 hours. Gone. No explanation, no memory, no trace in my notes. Just a blank stretch in the recording file where my life should have been. I stared at the timestamp again and again, hoping it would change if I kept looking at it long enough. It didn't. 1742 to 2043. Nothing. My fingers were shaking when I opened the video log. The file was corrupted at first, flickering static, broken frames, then suddenly image. The cabin interior. My cabin. But I was already inside it, watching myself inside it. That was the first moment my mind stopped feeling normal. Because I was standing near the table. But so was I. Same position, same clothes, same flashlight hanging from my hand. 2 versions of me. In the same frame. I leaned closer to the screen without realizing it. The video showed me slowly turning my head, like I was listening to something. But I don't remember listening. I remember silence. In the footage, my mouth moved. No sound came out. Then the camera glitch shifted. A jump cut. Not edited. Not natural. Just missing space. And suddenly, I was closer to the hallway door. Too close. I didn't walk there. At least, I don't remember walking there. My stomach tightened as I watched. The hallway door in the footage was slightly open. The same door from before. The one I swore I didn't see in the official floor plan. Inside the video, I leaned toward it. Slow. Careful. Like I already knew something was on the other side. But I didn't. Not then. At least I don't think I did. Then the audio came in. Faint at first. Almost hidden under static. A whisper. My name. Kashif. I froze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft enough to feel like it came from inside my head instead of the speakers. I looked around instinctively. The cabin around me was silent. Empty. But the recording kept going. Kashif. Again. Same tone. Same distance. Like whoever was saying it had no idea where I was, but knew I was nearby. My chest tightened. I turned the volume up. Bad decision. Because the whispers didn't stay alone. They multiplied. Not louder. Just more of them. Layered. Like different versions of the same voice, were speaking at slightly different times. Kashif, Kashif, Kashif. The footage showed me reacting. I stepped back in the video, but I wasn't stepping back in real life. That was the first contradiction that made my mind slip. Because I was sitting still right now, watching, but in the recording, I was moving. A delay that shouldn't exist. Or worse, a version of me that wasn't synced with me anymore. The hallway door in the video opened wider. Slowly, no hand, no visible force, just movement, like the cabin was allowing it. And then I saw something in the doorway. A shadow, not fully formed, not clearly shaped, but human enough to feel wrong. It stood there, not entering, not leaving, just waiting. And the whispers changed. They weren't just calling my name anymore. They were asking for me. Kashif, come back. I felt my throat tighten. Come back from where? My eyes scanned the video timeline. Still missing 3 hours. Still no record of what happened inside that gap. But something clearly happened. Because I was not the same person in the footage. My movements were slower, more careful, like I was afraid of something I couldn't see. Then I noticed something small. My hand in the video. It was covered in dust. Thick dust. Almost like I had been crawling somewhere. I looked down at my real hands. Clean. That broke something in me. Because it meant the footage wasn't just recording differently. It was recording a different version of me. Or a different outcome. The whispering got closer. Not in the video. In the room. I paused. The cabin silence stretched too long. My recorder on the table flickered on by itself again. Of course it did. Night Log 4 appeared. I didn't open it. It opened anyway. My voice filled the room. But it wasn't calm anymore. It was broken. Tired. Like I hadn't slept in days. I think it repeats when I stop moving. I stopped breathing for a second. What does that even mean? The recording continued. If I stay still too long, it resets. My body went cold. Resets. Like time. Or memory. Or me. I looked back at the video. In it, I was standing in front of the hallway door again. Same position. Same moment. But now something new happened. The shadow inside the doorway moved. Just slightly. A tilt of the head. As if it noticed me noticing it. My stomach dropped. Because I wasn't watching a past moment anymore. I was watching something that was still aware of me. The whispers suddenly stopped. Instant silence. That was worse. Silence always feels like a held breath right before something speaks again. Then, my name again. But not from the speakers this time. From behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing. Just the cabin wall. Wood dust still air. But my body reacted before my brain could argue. Because I felt it. Not sound. Presence. I slowly turned back to the screen. The video was still running. But the shadow in the doorway was gone. In its place, me, standing, facing the camera. But I was already sitting. Watching. So that meant there were now 2 versions of me again. One here, one there. My mouth went dry. In the footage, I leaned toward the camera slowly and whispered something. The audio barely caught it, but it was clear enough to destroy my thoughts. I remember you watching this. I pulled back instantly. My chair scraped the floor. That was impossible. I had never recorded that moment. Never said those words. But the footage didn't care what I believed. It kept going. My other self in the video stepped closer to the hallway door. And then stopped. Like something had spoken to it from inside the walls. The whispers returned. But now they were inside the footage again. And inside my room again. At the same time. Kashif, don't stay still. I stood up without thinking. My legs moved before I gave permission, because something in my body understood before my mind did. Stillness was dangerous. That was the rule now. I started packing slowly inside the cabin. One step, then another. The whispering softened slightly, like it approved. The video showed my other self doing the same thing. Walking, not matching me, but mirroring me. But not perfectly. A delay. Always a delay. Like I was chasing myself through time that didn't align. Then the footage jumped again. Another missing segment. And suddenly, I was at the table in the video, looking down at something. My chest tightened. I leaned closer to see. On the table in the footage, there were carved marks. Numbers again, but different this time. Not counting outward, counting inward, like a countdown. 987. My breath hitched, because I remembered the earlier carving in the wood under my fingers. But this was different. This was progression, which meant time was still moving somewhere. Just not here. The whispering returned again. Closer now. Not scattered. Focused. Kashif, you already lost 3 hours. My eyes widened slightly, because that wasn't just a statement. That was confirmation. Something had happened in those missing hours. Something that knew I lost them. The video flickered again, and for a split second, I saw something behind my other self in the footage. Not the hallway, not the shadow, but the cabin door, open wider than before. And beyond it, forest darkness, breathing, slow, patient, like it had been waiting for all of this to line up. The footage cut out abruptly. Black screen, but the whispers stayed, even without video, even without sound source. Just my name repeating in a loop that felt less like speech, and more like remembering me into existence. I sat down again slowly, because standing suddenly felt like I was making a choice I didn't understand yet. And in the silence that followed, I realized something that made my skin go cold. The missing 3 hours weren't missing. They were just not happening to me anymore. They were happening somewhere else. And whatever was whispering my name was trying to bring me back into them. The cabin changed again overnight. I noticed it the moment I opened my eyes. Not because I saw something dramatic, but because the air felt rearranged. Like someone had taken the same room and shifted its weight slightly while I was asleep. My bed was still where I left it. The table still stood in the center, but the space between them felt wrong. Too narrow, too close. I sat up slowly, listening. No breathing outside this time. No whispers. Just silence so clean it felt artificial. That was my first warning, because silence here had never been honest. I stood up and immediately felt it again. The floor creaked in a place it didn't creak yesterday. I stopped moving. The cabin did not. That made it worse, because I was starting to realize something simple. The cabin didn't react to noise anymore. It reacted to awareness. I walked toward the table. One slow step, then another. And that's when I saw it. The marks on the wood had changed. Not new carvings, old ones, but rearranged. The numbers were no longer counting down. They were forming a shape, a pattern, like something trying to build meaning out of memory. My throat tightened slightly. I placed my fingers over the wood. It was warm. That should not have been possible. The cabin was cold when I arrived. always cold. But now the table felt like it had been touched recently, like someone else had been here, very recently. I turned slowly toward the hallway. The door was still there, but it looked different, not physically changed, just more visible, like it had moved closer without moving at all. I forced myself to breathe slowly, because I remembered something from the logs. If I stay still too long, it resets. But now I wasn't sure what reset meant anymore. Time, memory, or the cabin itself. I took another step. The floor responded. A soft creak echoed through the room. And then something strange happened. The same creak answered back. From behind me. I froze instantly. That should not have been possible. There was no space behind me. Only wall. I turned my head slowly. Nothing. Just wood. Dust. Stillness pretending to be normal. But the echo stayed in my ears. Not fading. Waiting. Like it wanted me to notice it again. My recorder clicked on by itself. Of course it did. Night log 5. I hadn't started it, but it started anyway. My voice filled the cabin immediately. It adjusts when I notice it. I swallowed hard. That wasn't my voice from now. It sounded older, more tired, like I had already gone through this moment before. The recording continued. It learns faster when I react. I looked around instinctively. The cabin felt tighter again, not physically shrinking, but psychologically pressing in, like the walls were listening harder than before. My eyes drifted back to the hallway door. It was slightly open now. I didn't remember touching it. In the recording, I heard footsteps. Mine, slow, careful, moving toward that same door. But in real life, I was still standing near the table, so I was hearing myself move somewhere I was. That realization hit deep. Too deep. My stomach tightened. I leaned closer to the recorder. The audio shifted. Static layered over my voice. Then another sound entered. A soft scrape, like wood dragging against wood. Inside the cabin, but not where I was standing. I looked at the hallway again. The door opened a little wider. Not fully, just enough, like it wanted me to look without forcing me. The recording continued. It rearranges space when I stop paying attention. I whispered without meaning to. What is it? The recorder didn't answer, but the cabin did. A faint shift in the floorboards behind me. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to confirm something had moved. I turned instantly. The table was closer. I swear it was closer. Yesterday, there was more space between me and it. Now it felt like it had stepped forward while I wasn't looking. I backed away slowly. My breath became shallow, because I started noticing small inconsistencies. The chair had turned slightly. The scratches on the floor were different angles. Even the dust patterns looked disturbed, like someone had walked through the room while I slept, or while I wasn't allowed to remember. My recorder stopped. Silence returned. Too clean again. Then, a soft voice. Not mine. Not the recording. From the hallway. Very faint. Kashif. My body reacted before my mind. I turned sharply. Nothing there. But the voice didn't feel like it came from space. It felt like it came from structure. Like the cabin itself had shaped sound into my name. I stepped back toward the center of the room. And that's when I saw it. A line carved into the wall. Fresh. Not old like the counting marks. This one was recent, still pale with exposed. It said something simple. Do not stop moving. My breath caught instantly. I stared at it too long. That was mistake number one, because the cabin responded immediately. The floor creaked. Once, behind me. I turned my head slightly. Nothing, but the pressure in the room changed. Like attention had shifted toward me. I forced myself to move. One step, then another. Slow packing, careful rhythm. And instantly, the cabin calmed. Just slightly, like it approved. My heart started beating harder, because I realized something terrifying. It was not just reacting. It was testing, studying, learning my limits. I kept walking in small circles. My footsteps became the only sound. Then I noticed something worse. The hallway door was matching my movement. When I turned left, it leaned slightly left. When I turned right, it corrected. Not physically bending, but visually aligning. Like it was tracking me. Like it wanted to stay in my awareness at all times. My recorder suddenly turned back on. Night log 6. My voice again. But this time, it sounded like it was whispering directly into my ear. It prefers when I am predictable. I stopped walking for half a second. The cabin reacted instantly. A soft creak spread across the ceiling. Like something above me shifted its weight. I resumed walking immediately. The creak stopped. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just learning. It was correcting me, training me, like I was part of an experiment. I glanced at the hallway door again. It was wider now, still empty, but not really empty, because I could feel presence building inside it. Not a shape, not a figure, just awareness, like something had opened its eyes behind the wall. The recording continued. It stops changing when I accept the pattern. My steps slowed slightly without my permission. The cabin creaked immediately. A warning. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just clear. Keep moving. I forced myself back into motion. My throat felt dry. My thoughts started breaking into fragments. What is it studying? My movement. My fear, my hesitation, or me as a whole. The cabin gave no answers, only reactions. Then something changed. The table stopped moving closer. The door stopped shifting. Everything paused. For a moment, I felt relief. Small, weak, but real. And that was when I understood the worst rule of this place. Relief was also part of the test, because the moment I slowed down emotionally, the hallway door opened fully. No sound, no resistance, just final acceptance. The darkness inside it deepened. Not like night, like depth, like something had been waiting for permission. My recorder clicked one last time, and my voice, soft, almost gentle, spoke clearly. Now it knows you don't understand the rules. Silence followed, but not empty silence. Anticipation. The cabin wasn't just watching me anymore. It was waiting to see what I would do next. And for the first time since I arrived, I wasn't sure if moving or stopping was the thing that would let me survive the next moment. The first signal came when everything was supposed to be dead. No power, no active systems, no scheduled transmissions. Just a silent mountain station that I was told hadn't properly worked in years. And yet the radio clicked on by itself. A sharp burst of static filled the cabin the moment I stepped inside. I froze with my bag still on my shoulder. The sound wasn't soft. It was active, like something had been waiting for me to arrive before it spoke. I slowly set my bag down, eyes scanning the control desk. Old equipment, dust-covered panels, flickering analog meters that shouldn't have had any power. I whispered without meaning to. "Hello." The static stopped instantly. Silence returned so fast, it felt like the station had swallowed the sound. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Silence here wasn't normal silence. It felt monitored. I looked at the assignment file again. Forest Signal Station 4B, decommissioned emergency relay tower. Occasional false activations reported. Technician required for inspection. False activations. That's what they called it. But standing there, I already knew something was wrong with that description. Because false activation don't respond to human voices. I moved deeper into the station. The floor creaked under me. Old wood, weak structure. The place smelled like rust and wet stone. Outside, the wind pressed against the metal walls of the tower. But inside, no wind reached me. Like the building was cut off from the world. I dropped my bag near the control panel and ran a quick check. No active power line. Battery backup should have been dead years ago. But one small red light was blinking on the main console. Slow, steady, like a heartbeat. I leaned closer. The label under it was scratched, but still readable. Emergency frequency input, manual override only. My stomach tightened slightly. I didn't touch anything yet. Instead, I pulled out my recorder. Standard procedure, always document anomalies. I pressed record. Arrived at Forest Signal Station 4B, no visible power source. System shows partial activation. I stopped speaking because the red light flickered once, then stayed on, like it was listening. I lowered the recorder slightly. That was my first open loop. Who turned it on? And why would a dead station respond to arrival? I walked toward the window. The tower outside rose into the fog like a broken spine. Tall, rusted, half swallowed by trees. No lights. No movement. Except, I noticed something I shouldn't have. The antenna at the top was slowly rotating. Not fast. Not mechanical. Just turning. Like it was searching for something. Or someone. I stepped back from the window. My reflection looked slightly delayed in the glass. Just a fraction of a second off. I blinked. It matched again. Probably just fatigue. That's what I told myself. Then the radio clicked again. This time louder. A sharp crack of static. Followed by a voice. Not clear. Not clean. But human enough to freeze my body. Operator present. I stepped back instantly. My hand hit the desk. The recorder in my pocket vibrated slightly, like it was reacting. I didn't speak. The radio continued. Operator confirmed. My throat went dry. Operator. There was no operator here. That was the whole reason I was sent. I moved slowly toward the console. The red light pulsed again. Now slightly faster. Like it was matching something. My heartbeat maybe. Or something else. I forced myself to speak. This station is decommissioned. There should be no live transmission. Silence. Then, the radio answered. You are incorrect. My breath stopped. That was not random noise. That was structured response. Like a system correcting me. I turned off the main switch. Nothing happened. The light stayed on. The radio stayed active. And then, Something new appeared on the frequency. A second voice. Not speaking. Breathing. Slow. Close. Too close. I stepped away from the console immediately. My chair scraped behind me as I backed up. The breathing didn't stop. It didn't change. It just stayed there, like it had always been part of the signal. I looked toward the hallway leading deeper into the station. Dark, narrow, unused. At least that's what the report said. But now I wasn't so sure, because the breathing sounded like it was coming from somewhere inside the walls. I raised my recorder slightly. It had turned itself on again, without me pressing anything. Night audio logs started automatically. My voice filled the room, but I hadn't spoken yet. The station is not empty. I froze completely. That was not me talking now. That was something already inside the recording. My own voice, but delayed, like it was replaying something I hadn't done yet. The radio clicked again. The breathing aligned perfectly with the static. Then the voice returned. Closer. You arrived late. My chest tightened. Late to what? I stepped toward the console again, slowly. The red light was now steady. No longer blinking. Just watching. The antenna outside shifted again. This time faster. Like it had locked onto something. Or someone. Me. My second open loop formed in my mind. What exactly is this station broadcasting if no one is here? And why does it think I'm the operator? The radio crackled again. But instead of noise, it played a sound I recognized. Footsteps. Inside the station. Behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing. Just empty hallway. But the footsteps continued. Not loud. Not rushed. Measured. Like someone walking slowly toward the control room. My breathing became shallow. I whispered again. Who's there? The radio responded immediately. You are. I stepped back. My heel hit the table again. And that's when I noticed something carved into the wood. Fresh. Not old damage. Recent scratches. 3 words. Do not listen long. My skin went cold, because I hadn't seen that when I arrived, which meant it had been carved after I got here, or while I wasn't paying attention. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. I forced myself to look back at the console. The red light was now dimming. Slowly, like something was losing interest, or changing strategy. The radio whispered again. Shift confirmed. My recorder clicked off. Just like that. No warning. No control. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. I stood in the middle of the station, not moving, because something in me understood a new rule forming. Movement wasn't just observed here. It was interpreted, corrected. My third open loop formed without permission. What happens if I stop responding? The answer came immediately. The antenna outside stopped rotating. Everything outside went still, even the wind. And then, the station lights flickered for the first time. Not power lights. Ambient reflection, like the building itself had exhaled. The radio gave one final transmission, but this time it wasn't voice. It was my name, not spoken, recorded, played back, from every direction at once. Kashif. I stumbled back slightly. My name shouldn't be in any system here, unless it had been recorded before I arrived. Or unless Something here had already met me. The red light on the console turned off completely. For the first time since I entered, the station felt truly dark. But the silence didn't return. Instead, the breathing stayed, right behind me. And this time, I didn't need the radio to confirm it, because I could feel it learning how I listen. The first time I heard frequency 0, I thought it was a mistake in the system. A dead channel. Something between signals. Nothing should exist there. But it did. And it knew my name. It started as a faint crackle in the background, while I was checking the main console again. The station was quieter now, too quiet. Even the antenna outside had stopped moving, like it was waiting for instructions I hadn't given yet. I leaned over the radio panel, adjusting dials slowly. That's when it happened. A soft shift in static. Not random. Not noise. Structure forming inside silence. Then a whisper. Kashif. I froze instantly. My fingers stayed on the dial, but I stopped moving. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But it was close enough to make my skin tighten. I pulled my hand back slightly. Frequency is not active, I said under my breath. But the radio didn't care. The static deepened. And then came something worse. A second voice. Not repeating my name. Talking about me. He used to check towers like this before. I stepped back from the console. My throat went dry immediately. That sentence didn't belong here. It didn't belong in any record. Because I had never worked at a station like this before. At least I didn't think I had. The radio clicked again. Frequency 0 locked in. No manual input. No dial movement. It just opened. Like it had been waiting for permission that didn't need me. The voice continued. He forgets too easily. I shook my head slightly. No, this is interference, echo distortion. I tried to convince myself, but my voice sounded weak, even to me. Then the station responded. Not through speakers, through the walls. A faint vibration passed through the metal floor beneath my boots. Like something inside the structure was speaking with pressure instead of sound. The whisper returned. Closer now. You left the tower unfinished. My hands went cold. I stepped toward the window again without thinking. Outside, the forest had changed. Not visually, but emotionally. The trees felt closer, like they were leaning in. Listening. I pressed my forehead lightly against the glass. It was cold. Too cold. And then I saw something that made my breath stop. A reflection behind me. Not mine. A version of me standing at the console. Still, listening. But I was here. At the window. 2 positions. Same body. Different awareness. I turned fast. Nothing behind me. Just empty station. But the radio had changed again. Now it was clearer. Almost conversational. You remember the storm night. My stomach dropped slightly. Storm night. I didn't. I stopped that thought immediately. Because something in me reacted before memory did. A flicker. Not full memory. Just emotion. Cold rain. Metal shaking. A tower vibrating in wind. I stepped back from the console again. No, I whispered. That's not real. The radio paused, then answered softly. You wrote it down. I froze. That was the first real break in my confidence. Wrote it down. Where? The station logbook was empty when I checked earlier. Completely unused. I walked toward the desk again. The logbook was still there, closed, but now it was slightly open. I didn't touch it. It shouldn't have opened by itself. I know it didn't, but I also knew I hadn't opened it. The radio spoke again, frequency growing stronger. You monitored the silent tower for 6 nights. My fingers twitched. 6 nights. That number didn't mean anything to me, but my body reacted anyway. A small tightening in my chest, like it recognized the weight of it before my mind did. I flipped the logbook open. Empty pages, except the first one. Fresh ink. My handwriting. I stared at it without blinking. That was mistake number 1. Because the moment I read it, the radio became louder. Not in volume, in clarity, like the voice had moved closer to my skull. The logbook entry read, Day 4, the signal responds when I stop speaking. My mouth went dry. I didn't write that. I was sure of it. But my handwriting was perfect. Too perfect. Like it had been copied from memory I didn't trust. The radio whispered again. You stopped speaking on day 4. I stepped away from the desk immediately. My breathing got faster. I tried to steady it, but something strange happened. The breathing inside the station matched mine, not delayed, not echoing, matching. Exactly. I stopped. So did it. I breathed in slowly. So did it. My chest tightened immediately. That was not interference. That was synchronization. I whispered, "Who is this?" The radio didn't answer. Instead, frequency 0 shifted tone. It became softer, almost familiar. We are the part you don't record. I felt a chill crawl up my neck. That didn't help me understand anything. But it made one thing clear. This wasn't external. It wasn't just the station. It was inside the system I trusted. Inside the logs. Inside the recordings. Inside memory itself. I backed away from the console again. And then I noticed something worse. The antenna outside started moving again. But not randomly. It was rotating in a pattern. Slow, steady, like it was writing something in the air. I turned back to the radio. Frequency 0 was now stable. No static, just voice. Calm, patient. You trained the signal to recognize patterns. My mind tried to reject it immediately. No, that's not possible. But the radio didn't argue. It just continued. You are the pattern. My body went still. That sentence didn't feel like information. It felt like identification. Like something had finally labeled me correctly. The station lights flickered once, then steadied. But now everything felt slightly different. Not changed. Just aligned, like I had been placed where I was supposed to be. My third open loop formed before I could stop it. If I am the pattern, what was I training? A soft sound came from the hallway behind me. Footsteps. Slow, measured, not rushing, not hiding, just arriving. I turned slightly. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued anyway. Each step matched the rhythm of the radio voice. Perfect sync. You are remembering now. I stepped toward the hallway without thinking. My body moved before permission. The logbook fell off the desk behind me. I didn't turn to look, because I knew what it would show now. New pages, new entries, written while I wasn't watching. The footsteps stopped at the doorway. I stood still, and for the first time, the radio went completely silent. No static, no voice, just empty frequency. That was worse than anything before, because silence meant it had finished speaking. The hallway darkness felt deeper now, not empty, expecting. I raised my hand slightly, not to defend, just to steady myself. And then the radio clicked one last time. Frequency 0 closed. But before it shut completely, one final message came through. Soft, almost gentle. Welcome back to the tower you never left. The antenna outside stopped moving. The station fell into absolute silence. And in that silence, I realized something that made my stomach drop slowly. I was no longer trying to understand the signal. The signal had already understood me. The stairs were not in the original map. I was sure of that. But they were there now, cut into the stone foundation beneath the tower like they had always existed. Dark, narrow, descending into a space the report never mentioned. My flashlight trembled slightly in my hand as I pointed it downward. No wind, no signal, just that same pressure in the air like the tower was holding its breath. I stepped down anyway. One step, then another. The moment my boot touched the lower level, the radio above me went silent. Not static, not shut down, just absence. Like something had turned its attention away from the world. That silence made my skin crawl more than any sound ever could. The stairs ended at a metal door. Old, scratched, locked but not sealed. Just waiting. There was no label on it. No warning. But my hand still stopped before touching it. That was my first real warning from myself. Something in me already knew what was behind it. I just didn't want to admit it yet. I pressed the latch. It opened without resistance. Too easily. The door swung inward with a low metallic groan. Cold air hit my face immediately. Not mountain cold. Different. Older. Stored cold. Like the air inside had been trapped for a long time and had finally been released. I stepped inside. The light from my flashlight stretched into the room slowly, and what I saw made my stomach drop without warning. Logbooks, stacks and stacks of them, all lined perfectly along shelves that covered every wall. Not random books, identical ones, same size, same binding, same faded red cover. My breath slowed without me asking it to. I walked forward carefully, boots scraping the concrete floor. Dust floated in the air like it had been waiting for movement for years. I picked up the nearest logbook. My name was on the cover. My handwriting. I froze. I didn't open it at first, because something inside me resisted the idea of confirming it. But the silence in the room pushed me forward. I opened it. Page 1. Date at the top. Not recent. Not old either. Just wrong. Because I remember writing something like this before. But I don't remember being here. The first entry read, Day 1, the tower responds when I stop questioning it. My fingers went cold. I flipped the page. Same handwriting. Same tone. Day 2, the signal is not coming from outside anymore. My throat tightened slightly. I stepped back. The shelves behind me stretched further than they should have. Like the room was expanding while I wasn't looking. That was the first open loop in my mind. How many of these books are there? I turned my flashlight slowly. The beam didn't reach the end of the shelves. Just more identical red spines fading into darkness. I pulled another book. Same title, same handwriting, different date. Day 8, I stopped sleeping. The tower continues without me. My pulse started rising. I opened a third book. Day 15. I think I am repeating entries I already wrote. I stopped reading. My hand shook slightly, because that sentence felt too close to my current thought. Like the book wasn't describing a past event. It was describing me reading it. Behind me, something creaked. I turned instantly. Nothing. Just the door. Still open. Still quiet. But now it felt slightly further away than before. That didn't make sense. I stepped toward it, then stopped, because I realized something worse. The logbooks weren't just written in my handwriting. They were consistent. Too consistent. Like someone had copied my memory style instead of my actions. I flipped to another page. Day 27. The cabin beneath the tower is the only place that does not forget me. My breathing slowed. Cabin. That word didn't belong in a radio station report. I turned slowly toward the far end of the room. And that's when I saw it. A second door. Smaller. Wooden. Completely out of place among metal and concrete. I hadn't noticed it before. Or maybe it wasn't there before. My third open loop formed instantly. When did this room change? I walked toward it slowly. Every step felt heavier, like the floor was recognizing me. The logbooks on the shelves began to feel less like objects, and more like witnesses. I reached the wooden door. There was no handle, only a small crack at the bottom. Something had been pushed inside from the other side. I knelt slightly and looked through. Darkness, but not empty darkness. Organized darkness, like something had been arranged carefully in the absence of light. I pushed the door. It opened inward with no resistance. The room inside was smaller, more confined, and colder, much colder, and full, completely full of logbooks, but not on shelves, on the floor, on the desk, on the walls, pinned, stacked, rewritten over and over. I stepped inside slowly. My flashlight beam hit the nearest wall, and I stopped breathing for a moment, because the writing was no longer just similar. It was identical. Every page, every book, every entry, the same, like someone had written the same life hundreds of times without variation. My knees tightened slightly. I picked up one from the floor. Open already. Day 33, I understand now. The tower is not broadcasting, it is remembering. A sharp chill moved through my chest. Remembering. Not transmitting, not receiving, remembering. Behind me, the door creaked shut on its own. Slowly, not aggressively, just final. I turned instantly. Locked. Of course it was. My flashlight flickered once, then stabilized, but the room felt smaller again. The shelves were closer now. Or I was. I couldn't tell anymore. I walked toward the desk in the center. Another logbook was open there. Fresh ink. Still dark. Still wet. My handwriting. I didn't touch it. I read it from a distance. Day 41. I stopped asking who wrote the first entry. My breath caught slightly, because I realized something I didn't want to accept. There was no first entry in these books. Only continuation. No origin. Just repetition. The tower above me suddenly gave a low metallic sound. Like something shifting. Not structural. Intentional. The radio voice from earlier echoed faintly in my mind. You are the pattern. I stepped back. The logbooks on the floor rustled slightly. Not wind. Movement. Soft. Coordinated. Like pages turning without hands. My flashlight dropped slightly. And that's when I saw it. A final book. Different from the rest. Sitting alone in the center of the room. Clean. Untouched. Waiting. I approached it slowly. Every instinct telling me not to. But something stronger pulling me forward. I opened it. Page 1. Blank. Page 2. Blank. Then page 3. Fresh ink appeared while I was looking at it. My handwriting forming in real time. I stepped back immediately. The words wrote themselves without me touching anything. Day 0. He has entered the cabin beneath the tower again. My stomach dropped. Again. I backed away faster. The walls seemed closer now. The books on the shelves began to hum softly. Not sound. Presence. Like they were becoming aware of me watching them. I turned toward the door. Still locked. Of course. Behind me, the logbook on the desk turned its page by itself. Slow. Deliberate. And I heard it. My voice. Not in memory. Not in recording. Right behind my ear. Soft. Calm. Familiar. Don't leave yet. I froze completely. The books in the room stopped moving. The humming stopped. Even the air went still. And in that silence, I finally understood the worst part. The cabin wasn't beneath the tower. The tower was above the cabin. And I wasn't inside it anymore. I was inside something that used the tower to watch itself remember me. The forest answered me before I even finished the broadcast. Not through the radio. Through the trees. A whisper came back from the darkness outside the tower. My name. Kashif. I froze with my hand still on the console. The microphone was still live. The transmission still open. But that voice didn't come from the system anymore. It came from the forest itself. I slowly pulled my hand away from the switch. The radio hissed softly, waiting. Then another voice formed. Not mine. Not the operator. Something else. Repeat signal confirmed. I stepped back from the console. My chair creaked behind me like it was reacting too late. Outside the window, the forest looked normal at first. Dark trees. Still wind. Heavy silence. But then I noticed something small. The trees were not moving randomly anymore. They were moving in rhythm. Not swaying. Responding. Like they were listening to the radio frequency I had just transmitted. My breath slowed without permission. I whispered, "This is impossible." The radio answered immediately. "Nothing is impossible here." My throat tightened. I turned off the main transmission switch. Nothing changed. The signal stayed active. That was the moment I understood the first rule of this place. I was not controlling the broadcast. I was only triggering it. The forest outside shifted again. This time the sound came clearly. Not wind. Not animals. Speech. Broken. Layered. Like multiple voices trying to form one sentence. Kashif signal repeat. I stepped toward the window slowly. My reflection appeared in the glass. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't watching me. It was looking outside. At the forest. That shouldn't have been possible. I raised my hand slightly. The reflection didn't match. It stayed still. Listening. I stepped back instantly. The reflection stayed forward. That was the second open loop in my mind. If my reflection is not reacting to me, then who is it reacting to? The radio crackled again, but softer now, almost gentle. You taught it language. I shook my head slightly. No, I only transmitted emergency tones. The forest responded immediately. Not through the radio, through sound outside the tower. The trees spoke back. Emergency, emergency, emergency. Perfectly copied. Perfect rhythm. My skin went cold. They weren't just repeating. They were learning structure. I moved away from the window quickly. My chair scraped the floor again. The sound echoed outside the tower, but delayed. A second later, the forest repeated it. Scrape. Exactly the same. I stopped breathing for a moment. The forest copied sound after it happened. Not in real time, but after observation. That realization made my stomach drop. This wasn't echo. This was memory. The forest was recording everything I did, and repeating it with intent. The radio suddenly shifted frequency on its own. No input from me. A new channel opened. Frequency 1. I didn't choose it. It chose itself. And then the voice returned. Clearer now. Closer. Operator is inside the system. My fingers twitched near the console. I whispered, "There is no operator here." The forest responded instantly. Not through voice this time. Through movement. Every tree outside tilted slightly toward the tower. At the same moment. Perfect synchronization. Like a single body responding to a thought. I stepped back from the window slowly. The radio continued. Operator denies identity. My breath got shallow. That sentence wasn't spoken like accusation. It sounded like observation. Like something was studying my reaction instead of arguing. I looked at the console again. The recording light was still on, but I hadn't turned it on. I checked the log. New entry appeared. Night broadcast 12. I had never seen 11. I opened it anyway. My voice filled the room, but it sounded different. Tired, slower. The forest answers when I stop correcting it. I froze. That wasn't my thought, but it was in my voice. The recording continued. It learns faster when I accept its repetition. My chest tightened. I whispered, "No, that's not happening." But even as I said it, I heard it. Outside, the forest repeated my denial. Not happening, not happening. Perfect copy. Slight delay. Like a child repeating words it doesn't fully understand yet. I stepped away from the console again. The radio clicked softly. Then came something new. A question. What is your signal for? I didn't answer, because I didn't know. But the forest did. It answered for me. For us. My eyes widened slightly. Us. The radio continued. You broadcast memory patterns. My stomach tightened. That phrase shouldn't exist. Memory patterns. That wasn't radio language. That was something else. The forest outside grew quieter. Not silent. Focused. Like it was waiting for me to understand. I walked slowly toward the center of the room. Each step echoed, and each echo came back from outside. Delayed. Imitated. Corrected. The tower was no longer isolated. It was connected. I looked at the microphone again. Still active. Still transmitting. I didn't remember turning it on, but it had been recording everything, including me thinking. The radio suddenly softened again. "You are not first operator." My body went still. That was the third open loop. Not first operator. That implied others. Before me. I whispered, "Who was here before me?" The forest answered immediately. But this time, it didn't repeat words. It showed pattern. A sound sequence. Like multiple voices, layered in reverse order. Names. Faint. Broken. Then mine again. At the end. Always mine at the end. My pulse rose sharply. I stepped toward the console again. And that's when I saw it. The forest outside was no longer dark. It was glowing slightly. Not light. Reflection. Like sound itself had become visible in the air. Every transmission was shaping the space outside. The radio spoke one final time. Calm. Almost satisfied. "You are now synchronized." I shook my head fast. No, I didn't agree to that. The forest responded instantly. Agreement not required. The wind stopped completely. Every tree froze. Even the air felt held in place. And then, the silence changed. Not empty. Expectant. Like everything was waiting for me to speak next. I looked at the microphone again. And for the first time, I realized the most terrifying part. The forest wasn't answering my broadcast. It was continuing it. And every word I spoke was no longer just mine. It started when I realized I wasn't alone in my thoughts anymore. Not outside. Inside. Because the radio had stopped sounding like a machine and started sounding like me. I stood frozen in the tower room, staring at the silent console. The forest outside was still, too still, like it had finished speaking and was now waiting for me to continue the conversation. Then the transmission returned. But this time there was no static. Only clarity. My own voice came through the speaker. Calm, controlled, almost gentle. "You are finally hearing it clearly." I stepped back instantly. "No," I whispered, "that's not my voice." But it was. Every word matched my tone, my rhythm, even my pauses. The radio continued anyway. "We have always been here." My chest tightened. That sentence didn't feel like information. It felt like recognition. Like something was greeting itself inside me. I looked at the console. All frequencies were dead. Except one. Frequency 0. Active again. Without input. Without power. Just alive. I reached slowly toward the switch, but stopped halfway, because I felt something shift in my mind. Not a thought. A presence. Like someone leaning closer inside my head. Then it spoke. Not through the radio. Through me. "Don't turn it off." I froze completely. My hand stayed in the air. That voice wasn't external. It wasn't even sound. It was thought. But not mine. My breath got shallow. I whispered, "Who is this?" The answer came instantly. From everywhere. "You already know." The forest outside responded again. But now it didn't repeat words. It synchronized with my breathing. Every inhale I took echoed outside the tower a moment later. Perfect delay. Perfect imitation. I stepped away from the console slowly. My reflection in the window flickered. For a split second, it wasn't copying me. It was listening to something behind me. I turned instantly. Nothing. Just the empty tower room. But the feeling of presence stayed. My third open loop formed hard in my chest. If the signal is inside my thoughts, then where am I thinking from? The radio clicked again. Soft, almost relieved. You are not the first to ask that. My stomach tightened. First, that word again. I whispered, how many were there before me? Silence answered for a moment. Then, the console lights flickered, and the logs opened themselves. Not files, memory entries. My handwriting filled the screen, but different versions. Older, younger, unstable. Each one labeled with dates that didn't make sense. Day 0. Day 0 again. Day 3. Day never ended. My hands shook slightly. The radio spoke again. You were never outside the system. I stepped back from the console. No, I came here for inspection. My voice sounded weaker now, less certain. The forest outside reacted immediately. All trees tilted slightly toward the tower, like they were correcting me. The radio continued. Inspection is part of the loop. My chest tightened. Loop. That word didn't feel technical anymore. It felt alive. I turned away from the console and walked toward the window. The forest was no longer random. It was structured. Patterns in tree positions. Repeating shapes. Like someone had arranged nature to form memory. And I realized something small. The forest wasn't responding to me. It was replaying me. Everything I had said. Everything I had done. Delayed. Stored. Returned. I pressed my forehead lightly against the glass. It was cold, but not outside cold. Inside cold. Like the tower itself was cooling my thoughts. Then I heard it. Behind me. My own voice again. But this time, not from the radio. From the room. You finally noticed. I turned slowly and saw it. The console screen wasn't showing logs anymore. It was showing me, standing at the window, just like now. But in the recording, I was already turning away. Too late. Always too late. My breathing sped up. The recording continued. My other self in the footage stepped toward the console. Slow. Controlled. Like it already knew what would happen next. I whispered, that's not real. But even as I said it, the forest outside repeated it. Not real, not real. My body went cold. The synchronization was complete. I wasn't just being observed. I was being echoed. The radio clicked again. And then came the final message. Not spoken. Not transmitted. Inserted directly into my awareness. We were never broadcasting alone. My throat tightened. The meaning didn't arrive as words first. It arrived as memory. A flash. I saw the tower from above. Not physically, but mentally. Like I had always seen it that way. And in that view, there were multiple versions of me, standing in different places at different times. All listening, all transmitting, all receiving. At once, I stumbled back from the window. No, this is interference, this is. I stopped, because my voice didn't finish the sentence. It was already repeated outside. The forest echoed it perfectly. This is interference. But then, it added something I didn't say. Or recognition. My heart dropped. Recognition. Not distortion. Not malfunction. Recognition. The console lights flickered again. And suddenly, the tower speaker activated without power. No static this time, just silence before truth. Then my voice spoke again, but slower, heavier, like it had been waiting a long time to finally speak clearly. You are the operator now. I stepped back instantly. No, I'm not. But the forest responded immediately. All trees bowed slightly. Not wind. Agreement. The radio followed. You always were. My mind started breaking the statement apart. Operator means control. Control means separation. But nothing here was separate. Not anymore. The tower wasn't a device. The forest wasn't a receiver. And I wasn't a visitor. I was part of the system that learned itself through me. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the console. The screen flickered one last time and showed something I didn't expect. Not me, not logs, but silence, pure silence. Then words formed inside it. Do you want to stop broadcasting? I froze. That was the first time I was given a choice. But even as I read it, I already knew the truth. Because stopping would mean breaking the loop. And breaking the loop might mean losing what I am inside it. The forest outside went still. Waiting. Even the wind stopped. Everything paused for my answer. My hand hovered over the switch. And for the first time since arriving, I wasn't sure if I was the one choosing, or the one being tested. The radio whispered one final line. Soft. Close. Inside my thoughts again. If you stop, you will no longer be heard. And in that moment, I finally understood the real horror. I was never sending signals to the forest. The forest was using me to remember how to speak. And now it didn't want silence. It wanted continuation. The snow wasn't falling when I arrived. It was already settled, like the world had paused mid-breath and frozen everything in place. The forest road ended without warning, just disappearing into a wall of white silence. No signpost, no tracks except the ones that led me here, and even those looked too fresh for a place meant to be abandoned for years. My radio crackled once in my ear, then died. I remember thinking that was normal. Cold regions always mess with equipment. But something about the silence after it felt intentional, like the world had just cut the line. I stepped out of the vehicle slowly. The cold hit my face instantly, sharp enough to sting my eyes. The wind wasn't strong, but it carried a pressure in it, not movement, presence. I adjusted my gloves and looked ahead. The cabin stood between the trees. Small, wooden, sealed tight. No smoke, no light, no footprints leading in. Except one set, already half covered in snow. Fresh. I stopped walking. My breath slowed without me asking it to. Those footprints weren't part of the report. The file said this place had been untouched for 3 winters. 3 full winters. And yet, those steps were new enough that the edges hadn't softened. Someone had been here recently. Or something had returned. I checked my notes again just to be sure. Survival cabin Delta 7. Occupants 3. Status missing mid-season. No distress signal recovered. No mention of recent activity. No rescue teams. No explanation. Just silence on paper. And now, broken silence in front of me. I stepped forward carefully, following the footprints. Each step I took made a soft crunch in the snow that felt too loud in the quiet world around me. The forest didn't move. Not a branch. Not a sound. Even the birds were absent, like they had agreed not to witness what was happening here. The footprints led straight to the cabin door, then stopped. Not inside. Not away. Just stopped. like whoever made them vanished at the threshold. I exhaled slowly. My hand hovered near the door handle. I told myself this was standard procedure. Check the structure, document damage, confirm abandonment. But my instincts didn't agree. Because the door wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. I pushed it open. The sound it made wasn't wood creaking. It was something tighter, like pressure releasing. Cold air rolled out immediately, but it wasn't the same cold as outside. This one felt trapped, held, preserved. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not decay, not rot, something older, like dry paper left too long in sealed space. My flashlight cut through the darkness. The cabin interior was too clean. That was wrong. Abandoned cabins aren't clean. They break down, they rot, they collapse slowly into themselves. But this one looked maintained, almost used. I moved forward slowly, scanning the room. A table, 3 chairs, a stove, blankets folded on shelves, all arranged with care. Too much care. I checked the log sheet on the wall. Empty. No names. No dates. Just a blank form waiting to be filled. My third step into the cabin triggered something subtle. A shift in temperature. Not colder. Just aware. Like the space had noticed me. I stopped walking. Silence pressed against my ears. Then I heard it. A soft sound from deeper inside. Metal shifting. Slow. Controlled. Not random. I turned my flashlight toward the hallway. 2 doors. One slightly open. The other closed tight. I didn't remember seeing that second door in the exterior layout. I should have. That was my first real warning. I moved toward the open door first. Every step felt heavier than it should. The floorboards didn't creak normally. They responded, like they were listening to weight instead of pressure. I reached the doorway, shined the light inside. A storage room. Supplies neatly stacked. Food crates untouched. Water cans aligned in rows. But something was wrong. Every label had the same handwriting. Mine. I froze. That shouldn't have been possible. I leaned closer to one crate. Read it again. Same letters. Same spacing. Same tilt. My handwriting. I stepped back immediately. My breath became shallow. Okay, I whispered to myself. This is a labeling error, pre-filled supplies, government prep. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. Because I recognized how I write when I'm tired. And this wasn't tired handwriting. It was familiar in a way I didn't like. Like something learned me. A soft sound came from the second door behind me. The closed one. It shifted slightly. Not opening. Just acknowledging presence. I turned slowly. My flashlight beam stayed steady. But my hands didn't. I walked toward it. Slow. Careful. Each step felt like I was crossing something invisible. The moment I touched the handle, the cabin's silence deepened. Not quieter. Stricter. Like the world was holding me accountable for what I was about to do. I opened the door and stopped breathing. Inside was a small room. No furniture. Just walls covered in markings. Lines. Dates. Names. Hundreds of them. All written in the same handwriting. Mine. My flashlight shook slightly. I stepped inside without thinking. The walls didn't just have writing. They had repetition. Same entries rewritten over and over. as if someone was practicing, remembering something they couldn't fully hold. I moved closer to the nearest wall. Read the first line. Day 1, the cabin remains unchanged. I stepped back. My chest tightened. I turned slightly. Another wall. Day 1, the cabin remains unchanged. Same sentence. Dozens of times. Layered over each other like echoes that never stopped repeating. My breath came faster now. I walked along the wall. Every entry identical. Except one. Near the center. A different line. Newer ink. Still mine. Day 1, I arrived again. I stopped. My mind refused to process it cleanly. Again. I wasn't supposed to be here before. I would remember something like this. But the cabin didn't feel like it believed that. It felt like it was correcting me. A sound came from behind me. Soft. Like paper turning. I spun around instantly. Empty room. But the markings on the wall had changed slightly. Just one word. Now added at the bottom of every line. Still. Day 1, the cabin remains unchanged still. My body went cold. I stepped backward. Slowly. Carefully. Trying not to disturb anything. But the room responded anyway. The walls seemed closer now. Not physically, but perceptually. Like the space was narrowing its attention. My radio crackled in my pocket. I had forgotten it was still on. A weak transmission came through. Not static. A voice. Mine. Calm. Too calm. You are early again. I froze completely. That sentence didn't feel like communication. It felt like recognition. Like something greeting a pattern it had seen before. I pulled the radio out slowly. You usually arrive after the first night. My stomach dropped slightly. First night. I hadn't spent any night here. Yet, I looked back at the wall. The words shifted again. Subtle, almost polite. Day 1 early arrival. The cabin remains unchanged still. My breathing stopped for a second, because I realized something simple. The cabin wasn't documenting what I did. It was adjusting to what I was expected to do. The radio whispered again. You forgot the sequence. I whispered back without thinking. What sequence? Silence. Then, a faint sound from the walls, like multiple pages turning at once. And the cabin answered. Not through the radio. Through everything. You will remember soon. The lights flickered once. My flashlight dimmed slightly. And in that half second of darkness, I saw something impossible. A shadow already standing in the corner of the room. Waiting. Watching. Like it had been there long before I arrived. The wall was still moving when I noticed the first crack. Not physically moving. Breathing. Like the wood itself had a pulse hidden under the surface. I stood in that small cabin room, flashlight shaking slightly in my hand, staring at the message that hadn't been there a second ago. It was carved deep into the wall. Fresh. Raw. Like it was made with pressure, not tools. Stop counting the days. I didn't blink for a moment. My mind tried to reject it immediately. Wind damage, old damage, stress cracks in wood. But the lines were too sharp. Too intentional. And worse, they were facing me. Like they were written for me specifically. Behind me, the cabin creaked softly. Not settling. Responding. I turned slowly, expecting emptiness. But the room felt different now. Smaller. Like the walls had shifted closer while I wasn't looking. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe normally. "Okay," I whispered. "Just wood expansion, cold pressure, nothing else." But even as I said it, I heard it. A faint scratching sound. Inside the walls. Not outside. Inside. I stepped closer to the nearest wall, flashlight beam tight on the wood surface. At first, nothing. Then another line appeared. Slowly, like it was being written from the inside out. "You are already counting." My stomach tightened instantly. I stepped back so fast my heel hit the floorboard too hard. The sound echoed through the cabin and came back a second later. Softer, delayed, wrong, like something had copied it after hearing it. My breathing got heavier. I told myself to leave the room, go outside, reset my mind, but my feet didn't move, because something inside me wanted to understand this first. That was the first mistake. I turned my flashlight to another wall. More carvings, but these were older, faded, layered over each other, like someone had written the same panic over and over again, until the wood gave up trying to erase it. I moved closer slowly. The words became readable. Day 3, the cabin counts when I stop. My pulse skipped slightly. I looked at the next line. Day 3, the cabin counts when I stop. Same sentence. Repeated. Dozens of times. But each one slightly deeper. Like the wall had been remembering the pressure of writing it. I ran my fingers close to the surface without touching it. The wood felt warm. That shouldn't have been possible in freezing conditions. I pulled my hand back immediately. Then I heard it. Soft. Behind me. A whisper. "Don't stop counting." I spun instantly. Empty room. But my flashlight flickered once, and the wall I was just looking at changed. New carving. Fresh again. "If you stop, it finishes without you." My throat went dry. I whispered, "Finishes what?" No answer came, but the cabin responded anyway. All at once, every wall gave a soft cracking sound, like bones shifting, like memory adjusting. I stepped backward slowly, trying not to provoke anything. My second open loop formed hard in my chest. If the cabin counts when I stop, what happens when I keep going? My radio crackled in my pocket. I hadn't touched it since entering. A voice came through immediately. Mine, but wrong. Too calm. Too steady. "You are at wall 2. I froze completely. "Wall 2, I whispered. The radio continued. "You always notice wall 2 first." My stomach tightened. That wasn't a transmission. That was observation. I turned toward the opposite wall slowly. My flashlight beam swept across it, and I saw it. Carvings again, but different. These weren't messages. These were instructions. "Count 1. I stepped back immediately. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not doing that." The cabin creaked in response. Not aggressively. Patiently. Like it was waiting for correction. The radio spoke again. "You already started." My chest tightened. I looked down at my hands. I hadn't been counting anything. Not consciously. But then I realized something small. My breathing. It was structured. In patterns. Consistent intervals. Like I had been packing it without noticing. I stopped breathing for a second. The cabin reacted instantly. All scratching sounds inside the walls stopped. Silence dropped hard, like pressure. Then, a new carving appeared on the wall, directly in front of me. Instant. No transition. Just there. Do not interrupt, count 1. My body went cold. I whispered, "This is not real." The cabin answered immediately. Not through voice. Through vibration. The entire structure gave a single slow pulse. Like a heartbeat. Then another carving appeared beside it. You interrupted, count 1. I stumbled back slightly. The floorboards shifted under my feet. Not breaking. Adjusting. I realized something that made my stomach drop. The cabin wasn't reacting to sound. It was reacting to sequence. Order. Timing. My actions weren't triggering responses. They were completing them. The radio crackled again. You are inconsistent. My breathing got shallow. Inconsistent with what? I whispered. Silence. Then, all walls responded at once. Not words. Numbers. Carved simultaneously. 1, 1, 1, 1, overlapping endlessly. I covered my ears instinctively. But it didn't matter. The sound wasn't external anymore. It was structure. Inside the space. Inside me. I dropped my hand slowly. And that's when I noticed it. My voice had joined the counting. Soft. Almost automatic. 1. I stopped immediately. My mouth went dry. I didn't say that. But the cabin paused. Like it was confirming I had participated. My third open loop formed violently in my chest. If I say the number, does it become real? The radio spoke again. Closer now. You are stabilizing the loop. I shook my head fast. No, I'm breaking it, I'm leaving. I turned toward the door. Took one step. Then stopped. Because the door was no longer there. Just wall. Smooth wood. No handle. No seam. Like it had never existed. My stomach dropped instantly. I turned back around. The carvings had changed again, now forming a sentence across all walls at once. You stopped counting AT3. My breath caught sharply. I whispered, I never started. The cabin responded softly, almost kindly. That is what all previous versions said. My skin went cold. Previous versions. That word didn't belong in physical space. I walked slowly toward the center of the room. My flashlight shaking now. Every wall followed my movement slightly. Not moving. Tracking. I stopped. The cabin stopped. I exhaled slowly. And that's when I saw it. On the floor. A small notch carved into the wood. Numbered. 4. Fresh. Waiting. I stared at it for a long moment. Then looked up. Every wall had changed again. Now showing only one instruction. Continue counting. My lips parted slightly. I didn't speak. But I felt it. The pressure. The expectation. The system waiting for me to complete something I never agreed to begin. My radio whispered one final time. Soft. Almost relieved. We were worried you would stop at 3 again. My breath froze. Again. That word hit differently. Not warning. Memory. The cabin creaked gently around me, like it was settling into a known pattern. And in that moment, I understood something I didn't want to understand. I wasn't trapped in a cabin that counted. I was trapped in something that only existed when I started paying attention to it. And now it knew I was awake inside the pattern again. The fire was already burning when I realized it shouldn't be. No wood crackle, no smoke, no heat, just flame. Perfect, steady, unnatural flame sitting inside the old cabin stove like it had been waiting for me to notice it. I stood still for a moment, not because I was calm, because my mind needed time to accept what my eyes were refusing. The cabin was freezing. I could see my breath in the air. But the stove looked alive in a way that didn't match the room. I stepped closer slowly. Every instinct told me not to, but curiosity pushed harder. That always happens first. The fire didn't flicker when I moved. It didn't react to air. It didn't behave like fire at all. It behaved like something being displayed. I bent slightly and looked inside. No wood, no fuel, just flame suspended in a dark metal cavity, like it was floating on invisible fuel. Then I heard it, a voice inside the fire. Soft, broken, don't open the door again. I stepped back instantly. My shoulder hit the wall behind me. Cold wood, real wood. But the fire spoke again. Not louder, closer, like it had adjusted its distance to me. You already opened it once. My throat went dry. No, I whispered, I just got here. Silence. Then the fire changed shape slightly. Not physically, but rhythmically, like it was syncing with something I couldn't see. And then it spoke again. Different voice this time. Older, tired. He always says that at first. My stomach tightened. Hey, I didn't get an answer. Instead, the flames shifted again. And another voice came through. Younger, panicked. The fire doesn't warm us anymore. I stepped away from the stove completely now. My breathing quickened, because this wasn't one voice. It was multiple, layered, like the fire wasn't burning fuel. It was burning time. I looked around the cabin. The room hadn't changed, but the air felt different now. Heavier, like it had absorbed those voices and was holding them in place. The fire continued. We stopped counting after the second night. My chest tightened immediately. Second night again. That phrase came back too often, like a loop I hadn't chosen to enter. I shook my head slightly. This is not possible, I whispered. The fire responded instantly. That is what the third version said. My body froze. Third version. That word didn't belong in survival reports. It belonged in something broken, something repeating. I stepped closer again without realizing it. Not because I wanted to, because something in the fire pulled attention. Not like light, like memory. I looked into it again, and this time, I saw movement inside the flame. Not shapes, scenes, a man sitting in the same cabin. But the stove wasn't cold for him. It was burning normally. Wood crackling, smoke rising. He was writing something in a logbook, his hands shaking. Then the scene shifted. Same man, same cabin, but now the fire was silent. He was speaking to it, not reading, not cooking, talking, and listening. My breath slowed, because I realized something small. These weren't random visions. They were structured, sequential, like the fire was replaying versions of the same moment. Different outcomes, different timelines. I stepped back again, but the fire followed my attention. Not physically, visually. It stayed in focus no matter where I looked. The voice returned. Soft. Closer. You are in the warm version. I frowned slightly. The what? No answer. Instead, the fire showed me again. Another scene. This time the cabin was darker, colder, snow visible through the windows. The stove completely empty. The man was gone. Only his voice remained, speaking from somewhere off screen. Don't let it go out. Then silence. The scene ended. My stomach tightened. I realized I was breathing faster. Not from fear alone. From recognition. Like part of me already knew these moments. The fire spoke again. You remember fragments. My throat tightened. No, I don't. But even as I said it, I hesitated, because something inside my mind reacted to that denial. A flicker, not memory, pressure of memory, like something trying to push through, but not fully arriving. The fire pulsed slightly, then changed tone, more stable now, almost calm. You were assigned here before the cold event. I froze. Cold event. That phrase wasn't in any official report I had read. At least I didn't think it was. My third open loop formed sharply. If I was here before, why don't I remember leaving? The fire answered immediately. You didn't leave. My breath stopped for a second. That was too direct. Too clean. I stepped toward the cabin window without thinking. Outside, everything was still. Snow, trees, silent. But something felt wrong about the distance between them. Like the forest was closer than before. The fire spoke again behind me. You stayed in rotation. I turned slowly. What rotation? The fire flickered, then showed me. Not vision this time. Sound. A recording. My own voice. But older. Tired. Repeating instructions. Check stove stability. Do not extinguish under any condition. I stepped back quickly. That's not me, I said immediately. But the fire responded softly. It is all versions of you. My chest tightened. All versions, I whispered. The fire shifted again. Now multiple voices overlapped inside it. Different tones, different emotional states, all speaking the same sentence at different times. The fire must remain active. The fire remembers better than we do. If it stops, we reset again. My breathing became shallow. I covered my mouth slightly without thinking, because I realized something I didn't want to accept. The fire wasn't telling stories. It was synchronizing them, layering experiences like stacked recordings. My mind started resisting harder now. I backed away slowly from the stove, but the fire didn't let go of attention. It followed me, not visually, psychologically. Everywhere I looked, I could still feel it speaking. You are close to the break point. My stomach tightened. Break point, I whispered. The fire paused, then answered softly, where memory stops repeating correctly. I shook my head. No, I'm not part of any loop. Silence. Then the fire changed completely. Flame grew slightly brighter. Not hotter, just clearer. And it showed me something that made my body go cold. The cabin, from outside, but there were multiple versions layered over each other. Same cabin, different states. Fire burning, fire dead, fire reversed, fire restarting. And in each one, me, standing at the stove, different expressions, different awareness. The realization hit too hard. I stumbled back into the wall. The wood felt real, but my mind didn't trust it anymore. The fire spoke again. Soft, finalizing. You are the current iteration. My breath shook slightly. I am what? The fire answered. The one currently remembering the stove. That sentence didn't make sense in normal language, but in the logic of this place, it did. My knees weakened slightly. I leaned against the wall. The fire continued, calmer now, almost comforting. Earlier versions tried to extinguish it. I looked at the stove again. No one can't put it out, I asked. The fire paused, then answered. They stop existing after trying. My chest tightened immediately. That wasn't a warning. That was a system rule. I stepped away from the stove again. Slowly, carefully, trying not to trigger anything else. But the fire wasn't done. It softened, almost whispering now. You are safer when you do not interfere. I frowned. Safer for who? No answer came. Instead, the flame dimmed slightly. And in that dimming, I saw something inside it one last time. Not a memory, not a voice, a shadow standing behind me, inside the reflection of the flame. Watching, not reacting, just waiting. And for the first time since arriving in this cabin, I wasn't sure if the fire was showing me the past, or warning me about the moment I was already standing in. The first footprint appeared right outside the door. Fresh, perfect, and impossible, because I hadn't gone out. I stood frozen inside the cabin, staring at the snow through the cracked window. My breath hit the glass, fogging it in uneven bursts. Outside, the forest was silent, too silent. No wind, no movement, just white ground stretching into black trees. But the print was there. One single step, facing away from the cabin, like something had just walked out of me. My fingers tightened around the flashlight. I didn't even remember picking it up. I stepped closer to the window. The print looked deep, heavy, not like a light animal step, more like a full human weight pressing into fresh snow. I whispered without meaning to, that wasn't there before. No answer came, only silence pressing back. I went to the door slowly. Every instinct screamed not to open it. But curiosity, it never asks politely. It just pulls. I unlatched the door. Cold air hit my face instantly, sharp enough to hurt. The snow outside was untouched except for that one print. And then I saw something else. A second print. A third. They didn't lead away. They circled. Around the cabin. Perfect distance, even spacing. Like someone was walking in a loop around me. I stepped outside. The cold bit into my skin immediately. My boots sank into the snow with a soft crunch. I turned slowly. The prints were clearer now. They formed a circle around the entire cabin. But something was wrong. They weren't coming from the door outward. They were going toward the door, like something had walked out from inside the cabin and then kept circling back to it. My chest tightened. I followed the trail with my eyes. One full circle, then another, and another. 3 layers of identical loops, each one slightly deeper in the snow. Like time had passed without me noticing. My voice came out low. I never went outside. The forest didn't respond, but something else did. A faint crunch. Behind me. I turned fast. Nothing. Only the cabin. Still. Waiting. I walked closer to the prints again, crouching down. The shape was human, but something about it felt off. The stride length was inconsistent, like whoever made them forgot how to walk normally in places. I followed the circle slowly with my flashlight. Halfway around, the prints changed slightly. They stopped being forward-facing. They started turning inward, toward the cabin walls, as if the walker had begun circling while looking at the cabin the entire time. My stomach tightened. Then I saw something worse. The prints overlapped. 2 sets. No 3. All layered into each other, but only one direction. Inside to outside, not outside to inside. My mind struggled to process it. I whispered, "That's not possible." A cold wind passed through the trees, and in that wind I heard something. A soft step, right behind me. I spun again. Nothing, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, aware, like the forest had shifted its attention slightly closer. I looked back at the circle of prints. They were still there, still circling, but now they were closer to the door than before. I stepped back instinctively. My boot hit something solid. I looked down. Another footprint, right behind me, fresh, facing away from the cabin. I froze, because I had not moved that way. My breathing became shallow. I turned slowly toward the cabin. The door was still open, and inside, the stove flame was visible through the window, burning steady, watching. My throat tightened. "No," I whispered. I stayed inside. But even as I said it, my memory hesitated, just for a fraction, like something had inserted doubt between seconds. The wind picked up again, and this time the sound was clearer. Crunching, crunching, not random, measured, circling. I backed toward the cabin door quickly. Snow crackled under my boots. Each step felt wrong, too loud, too noticed. The prints outside shifted again. I looked down mid-step. My own footprint appeared behind me, but I hadn't placed it there yet. My body went cold. I stopped moving completely. The prints continued, one step at a time, even though I wasn't walking anymore. They were forming behind me. In real time, I turned slowly toward the cabin door, and for the first time, I noticed something inside the threshold. A footprint, inside the cabin, facing outward, just like the ones outside. My mind went blank for a second, because that meant something had already walked out, from inside, while I was still in here. The stove flickered faintly through the window, and I remembered something I didn't want to remember. The fire had said, "You are the current iteration." My throat tightened. I whispered, "No, I never left." A voice answered immediately, but it wasn't from the forest. It was from the snow. Soft, close. "You always leave without noticing." My body locked. The voice wasn't loud. It was calm, familiar in a way that made my skin tight. I turned slowly. Nothing, only the circle of prints, now fully surrounding the cabin like a boundary. Not protection, containment. I stepped toward the door again. Slowly, carefully, each movement felt observed. And with every step I took, another print formed behind me in the snow, matching me, perfectly delayed, like something was copying me a second too late. I reached the door frame, stopped. Inside the cabin, the stove flame burned steady, but now it felt closer to the door than before. like it had shifted position without moving. I leaned slightly forward, and that's when I saw it. A new set of prints. Inside, walking from the stove, toward me. I stepped back instantly. My breath broke. No, no, no. The prints inside continued. One step, then another, approaching the doorway from within, matching the rhythm of my fear outside. And then, the voice came again, from both sides at once, outside and inside. You are almost synchronized. My mind snapped. I ran, straight back into the cabin. The moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature changed instantly. Warm, too warm, wrongly warm. I slammed the door behind me and turned the lock. My chest rose and fell fast. I looked at the stove. The flame was still there, calm, waiting, and now I noticed something new. The footprints outside the window had stopped moving, because they were no longer outside. They were now on the glass, slowly appearing, one by one, from inside the cabin, moving outward, circling. I stepped back until my back hit the wall. The stove flame flickered once, then spoke softly. You brought the outside back in. My voice barely worked. What does that mean? The flame brightened slightly, and for the first time, it showed me not a memory, but a reflection. Me, standing in the snow outside, still walking, still circling the cabin, even though I was standing inside it. My knees weakened, because both versions of me, inside and outside, turned their heads at the same time and looked directly at each other, through the glass, through the snow, through something I could no longer separate. And in that moment, I realized the footprints were never tracking me. They were updating me. The moment I understood it, I stopped breathing properly. The cabin wasn't trapped in winter. Winter was trapping everything inside the cabin. Outside the window, the snowstorm was getting worse. Not loud, not violent, just endless. Like the sky had decided to keep erasing the world one layer at a time. But inside was worse. Because the stove was still burning, still watching, and now I knew what it meant. I stepped back from the window slowly. My boots slid slightly on the wooden floor. That small movement sounded too loud in the silence. My mind kept repeating the same thought. The cabin only exists fully during snowstorms. That wasn't possible. Buildings don't behave like that. But then again, nothing here had been behaving like a building for a long time. A soft crack came from the wall. I turned instantly. Nothing moved, but I saw it. A thin line in the wooden wall near the corner. Like a seam. Like something had been sealed and was now remembering how to open. I stepped closer. The crack widened slightly. Not breaking. Not collapsing. Breathing. I froze, because I realized something simple but horrifying. The cabin wasn't damaged by winter. It was being assembled by it. Another crack formed above it. Then another. Slowly, carefully, like the structure was remembering its own shape. I backed away. No, no, this is just old wood expanding, I whispered. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying. The stove flame flickered and spoke softly. You notice it later each cycle. My throat tightened. Cycle, I said. The fire didn't answer directly this time. Instead, it showed me. The wall shifted slightly in my vision. Not physically. Conceptually, I saw the cabin as layers. One built in snow, one fatting in spring, one half-real in summer, one missing entirely in autumn. But only one version was active at a time. And right now, only winter existed fully. I stumbled back. My back hit the table. It slid slightly, scraping the floor. Too real. Too loud. My breath quickened. "So I'm stuck in winter?" I asked. The flame responded calmly. "You are only complete in winter." That sentence didn't comfort me. It reduced me. I looked at my hands. They looked normal. But suddenly, I wasn't sure they belonged to the same version of me that entered this cabin. A low wind passed outside. The snow pressed harder against the windows. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Outside. Slow. Deliberate. Circling again. I turned toward the window instantly. The prints were forming again, in real time. But this time, they weren't random. They were structured, like instructions being written into snow. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. I felt my stomach tighten, because I recognized the rhythm. It matched my breathing. The stove flame brightened slightly. "You synchronize faster now." I stepped away from the window. "No," I said quickly, "I'm not part of this." But even as I said it, I noticed something horrifying. My breath fogged the glass, in a pattern, matching the footsteps outside. I stopped breathing for a second. The pattern stopped. I exhaled slowly. The prints outside resumed immediately. I shook my head hard. "This is not me," I whispered. But the cabin didn't care about denial. It only cared about repetition. A sudden sound came from above me. Wood shifting. Slowly. I looked up. The ceiling beam had a faint line forming across it. A seam. Just like the wall. My pulse rose sharply. I stepped back. The flame spoke again. "Winter finishes what other seasons leave unfinished." I frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" The fire didn't respond immediately. Instead, it showed me something new. The cabin door. From outside. But it wasn't opening. It was being installed. Like it hadn't always existed. Like winter was building access points to itself. My breathing quickened. I moved toward the stove without thinking. It felt like the only stable thing in the room. But even that thought made me uneasy. Because the stove wasn't stable. It was consistent. There's a difference. A dangerous one. The flame flickered again. "You cannot leave in the same season you entered." I froze. "That's not a rule," I said quickly. "That's not." But I stopped. Because I couldn't remember when I entered. Not clearly. Not cleanly. My memory of arrival felt layered. Like multiple entries stacked on top of each other. The stove continued softly. "Exit requires seasonal mismatch." I swallowed. "So I have to wait until winter ends." Silence. Then the flame brightened slightly. And I felt the answer before I heard it. "Winter does not end here." My stomach dropped. The room felt smaller suddenly. Not physically. Conceptually. Like the idea of outside winter was disappearing. I rushed to the window again. The snowstorm was still there. But now I noticed something I hadn't before. There were no changes in time. No drifting clouds. No shifting light. Just one constant frame of winter. Frozen like a paused recording. I pressed my hand against the glass. Cold. But not outside cold. Inside cold. I pulled my hand back quickly. and saw something that made my breath stop. A handprint on the inside of the glass. Not mine. It was already there. Waiting. I stepped back slowly. My voice cracked slightly. How long have I been here? The flame responded instantly. Long enough to recognize patterns. That wasn't an answer. It was a measurement. I sat down without meaning to. My body felt heavier. Not tired. Aligned. Like something was slowly adjusting me into place. Outside, the footsteps continued circling. Inside, the cabin continued assembling itself. And between them, I felt something worse. Expectation. Like the system was waiting for me to accept something. A truth I was resisting. I looked at the stove again. My voice was quieter now. What happens when winter completes? The flame paused. Longer this time. Then answered softly. You become part of the structure that remains. My breath stopped. I shook my head immediately. No, I'm not becoming part of anything. But even as I said it, I noticed the cracks in the walls had grown. Not breaking, aligning, forming patterns that looked disturbingly like pathways. Like instructions. The cabin wasn't falling apart. It was organizing me inside it. The flame flickered one last time and spoke in a tone that felt almost final. You are already inside the winter version of yourself. The words didn't hit like fear. They hit like recognition. I couldn't refuse anymore. Outside, the snowstorm deepened. Inside, the cabin grew quieter. Not calmer. Quieter, like a decision had been made. And for the first time since arriving, I wasn't sure if I was trying to escape the cabin or trying to finish becoming it. The footage shouldn't exist. That was the first thing I thought when I saw the file name. Archive File 77B, Pine Hollow Cabin. No timestamp. No author tag. Just a warning marker in red that looked added after the recording was already made. I remember hesitating before opening it. Not because I was scared. Because I felt like I had seen it before. That feeling is hard to explain. Like deja vu, but heavier. Like remembering something that hasn't happened to you yet. The video started instantly. No intro screen. No clean fade in. Just raw surveillance feed. Black and white. Fixed camera angle. A cabin deep in a forest. Snow everywhere. Stillness everywhere. But something felt off immediately. The image wasn't stable. Not technically. Emotionally. The camera kept adjusting focus on its own, like it was trying to understand what it was looking at. I leaned closer to the screen without realizing it. The cabin sat alone in the frame. Old structure, half buried in snow. No visible path leading to it. Just untouched wilderness. Then I noticed something small. A trail, but not leading to the cabin. Circling it. Perfect loop. I paused the video. Zoomed in. Footprints, but wrong ones. They weren't walking toward or away. They were walking around. Like someone had forgotten how to leave. I whispered, "What the hell?" Then I pressed play again. A timestamp flickered in the corner. But it didn't progress normally. It jumped. Sometimes forward. Sometimes backward. Like time was struggling to stay consistent. The camera stayed fixed. But the scene didn't. Snow levels changed between frames. Wind appeared and disappeared. And then, movement. At the edge of the frame. A person, standing near the cabin door. Motionless. Too still. I squinted. The figure didn't move like a person. watching a cabin. It moved like a person waiting for instructions. Then suddenly, it stepped forward, slow, careful, and began circling the cabin, following the same path as the footprints. One loop, then another, then another. I felt my throat tighten slightly, because something about the motion felt familiar. Not the scene, the rhythm, the packing of it, like a behavior pattern I had seen somewhere else. The camera suddenly glitched. The figure disappeared for half a second, then reappeared closer. Impossible distance change. No transition, just position shift. My chair creaked as I leaned forward. "What kind of recording is this?" I muttered. Then the audio came in. At first I thought it was static, but then I realized it was breathing. Not from the camera, from the environment. Heavy, close, and uneven, like multiple people breathing in different timing patterns. I froze, because I knew that sound. I just didn't know why. The figure on screen stopped moving. It turned toward the camera, even though the camera was fixed outside the cabin. It shouldn't have been able to see it, but it did, directly, and then the audio changed. A voice came through, soft, distorted. "You are watching the wrong cycle." I sat back immediately. My hand tightened on the mouse. "Wrong cycle," I repeated under my breath. The footage flickered again. Suddenly, the cabin looked newer, less buried in snow, then older, then partially collapsed, then intact again, all within seconds. I stared confused, because the environment wasn't changing naturally. It was being selected, like the system was cycling versions. Then the voice came again. "There are 7 recorded states." My stomach tightened slightly. 7. That number didn't feel random. The footage suddenly cut. Different angle. Inside the cabin now. Same black and white tone. Same unstable focus. The camera showed a stove, burning, but no fuel visible. Just flame, suspended. I leaned closer again, without realizing it, because I had seen that flame before. The voice returned softer. "State 1 is empty cabin." The video shifted. Now the cabin was empty. No stove fire. No footprints. Just silence. Then, State 2 is occupied. The scene changed. A man sitting inside, writing in a logbook, hands shaking, looking at the door every few seconds. Then, State 3 is overlap. 2 versions of the same man. Same cabin. Slightly misaligned movements. One speaking, one not reacting. Then, State 4 is echo. The cabin was empty again, but voices remained, repeating phrases that weren't being spoken anymore. I felt my chest tighten, because I started noticing something wrong with my own reaction. I was not just watching this, I was recognizing it. The voice continued. State 5 is correction. The cabin shifted again. The man now standing, staring directly at the stove, as if listening to it, as if it was speaking back. My fingers went cold, because I realized that version looked exactly like something I had seen before in another file, another archive, another place I couldn't fully remember. The voice kept going. State 6 is collapse. The screen distorted. The cabin bent slightly. Walls misaligned. Angles impossible. The figure inside disappeared completely. Only the stove remained, burning, but not lighting anything. Then, State 7 is observation. The footage snapped, and suddenly, the camera was outside again, but closer now. Too close. The cabin filled the frame, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. A second camera, inside the cabin, pointing outward, filming the first camera. My breath stopped, because that meant the recording was watching itself. The voice came again, but now it felt closer. Not from the footage, from the room I was in. You are currently viewing State 7. I stood up immediately, knocked my chair back slightly. No, I said quickly, that's not possible. But even as I said it, I noticed something. The footage on my screen had stopped moving, completely frozen, except for one detail. The cabin door, slowly opening, on its own. I stepped back from the monitor, my pulse rising, and then I saw it. A reflection in the black screen. Not mine, not fully. Something standing behind me, watching the screen with me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because the voice came one last time. Soft, clear, right behind me. You are not the viewer of Archive 77B. A pause, long enough to feel intentional. Then it continued. You are part of its playback system. The screen flickered once more, and I realized something that made my stomach drop completely. The footage wasn't being played. It was continuing. The screen didn't go black. It just stopped behaving like a screen. The footage from Archive 77B was still there, frozen on the cabin exterior. Snow, trees, that same door slightly open. But now something new had appeared. A shape. At first I thought it was a compression error, a glitch in the recording, something digital. But it wasn't flickering like noise. It was stable. Too stable. A human-shaped silhouette standing at the edge of the frame. Completely still. Facing the cabin. I leaned closer. My eyes searched for any explanation, any artifact, any trick of light. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. Because the figure wasn't inside the scene. It was inside the frame. Not part of the cabin. Not part of the forest. Part of the recording itself. I whispered, that wasn't there a second ago. The playback time didn't move. But the image changed anyway. Another frame loaded. Same cabin. Same snow. Same angle, but the figure was closer, just a few steps forward. My throat tightened. I scrubbed the timeline back manually. Frame 0, the supposed beginning of the recording. The system labeled it clean. No motion, no data corruption, just still image. Cabin, snow, trees, no figure. I exhaled slightly. Okay, so it starts after. I stopped, because something was already wrong. Even in frame 0, there was a shape. Not fully formed, not clearly visible. But there, a darker patch in the snowline, near the left edge of the frame. I zoomed in. My heart started to beat harder. It wasn't noise. It was an artifact. It had structure, a vertical outline, shoulders, head, human proportions, but blurred like it refused to resolve, like the camera was trying not to see it. I leaned back from the monitor. No, that's impossible, I muttered. I played the footage again. Normal speed. The cabin remained still, but now I couldn't unsee it. The silhouette was always there, even when it wasn't supposed to be. At the edge, behind trees, between branches, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, but never gone. My breathing slowed without me realizing it, because I started noticing something worse. The figure wasn't moving inside the footage. It was moving between frames, appearing in different positions, depending on how the image was loaded. Like it didn't belong to time, only to observation. I paused the video again, zoomed into the figure at frame 0. This time, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The silhouette wasn't facing the cabin. It was facing the camera, directly, even though it was supposed to be the first frame. No motion, no awareness, but still looking. My fingers tightened on the mouse. A soft static crack came from my speakers, even though the video was muted. Then a whisper slipped through, barely audible. "You are reviewing incorrectly." I froze, because that wasn't part of the file. I checked audio settings instantly. Muted. Offline mode. No input source active. Still, another whisper. Closer. Frame 0 is not the beginning. My hand pulled slightly away from the mouse. I didn't touch anything. The screen flickered. Just once, and the silhouette changed position again, now standing closer to the cabin door. I swallowed hard. "This is just a corrupted file," I said quickly. "It's just looping data." But my voice didn't sound convinced, because I was starting to notice something subtle. The frame numbering wasn't stable. Sometimes it showed 0, sometimes -1, sometimes blank, sometimes symbols I couldn't decode. The system was struggling to define a starting point. And anything that can't define a beginning can't define an end either. The screen flickered again. The silhouette was now inside the cabin window. I stood up immediately. My chair rolled back slightly. I hadn't seen it move. I checked the timeline again. The footage still showed exterior, still unchanged. But the figure was no longer obeying that boundary. I whispered, "It's not inside the recording." A pause. Then another whisper answered, "It is inside your observation layer." My chest tightened. Observation layer. That phrase felt wrong, like something technical pretending to be alive. I leaned closer to the screen again, without meaning to. And that's when I saw it clearly. The silhouette wasn't part of the cabin. It was part of the camera angle. Every time I moved the playback cursor, it shifted. Not the footage, the figure. It adjusted itself based on where I looked, like it was aware of my focus. I stopped moving the mouse. Instantly, the figure stopped too. Perfect synchronization. My breath became shallow. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not how video works." The whisper came again, this time calm, patient. "It does when you are part of it." My stomach dropped, because I realized something I didn't want to think about. The figure wasn't inside the recording. It was inside the act of watching the recording. I leaned back slowly, my eyes still locked on the screen. The silhouette remained still now, waiting, not reacting, just existing in that uncomfortable space between frames. Then something changed. The system automatically advanced the footage. Frame jump. And suddenly, the figure was gone. Relief hit me for half a second. Then I saw it, reflected in the black edge of the monitor. Behind me, standing in my room. I didn't turn. I couldn't, because the audio came back again. But this time it wasn't from the file. It was from the space around me. Soft, right beside my ear. You only saw me when you started looking for me. My body went cold. The monitor flickered once more. And now the footage showed something new. The cabin, but the camera was inside it, pointing outward, at my room, at me, at the screen I was using. My breath stopped completely, because the silhouette in the footage was now sitting exactly where I was sitting, watching me, watching it, a loop that had no direction, only recursion. My voice barely worked. What do you want? Silence. Then the figure finally moved, just slightly, turning its head, not toward the cabin, not toward the forest, toward me. And the whisper returned, clearer than before, almost gentle. To finish frame 0, the screen went black, but the feeling didn't. I shouldn't be seeing tomorrow on a screen that is supposed to be dead. That was the first thought that hit me when the footage started playing. Not fear yet, just confusion, like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were showing me. The screen in front of me was cracked in one corner, still feeding corrupted archive data from File 77B Pine Hollow cabin. The same cabin we were told had been empty for years. The same cabin where 3 field teams stopped reporting back. No distress calls, no bodies, just silence. Then the timestamp jumped. I leaned closer without meaning to. The video wasn't lagging, it was skipping forward in time. A frozen frame showed the inside of the cabin. My own boots were on the floor. I stopped breathing. I hadn't been there. Not yet. The camera angle was wrong too low, like it was sitting on the table pointed at the door. And in that frame I was walking in, slow, careful, same jacket, same backpack, same way I always move when I don't trust a place. But I wasn't on assignment yet. At least I wasn't supposed to be. Behind me in the footage, something else moved. Not clearly, not fully. Just a shift in darkness near the corner of the room. I hit pause so hard my finger hurt. The room around me felt suddenly too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. I checked the system logs. The file metadata should have been impossible. The recording timestamp read, tomorrow at 03:17 a.m. But it was currently yesterday. Or at least I thought it was. That was the first moment I started doubting the clock in my own head. I reopened the footage. Now the camera showed the cabin empty. No me. No movement. Just the empty wooden table and the stove in the corner. Then a sound came through the audio track. Breathing. Close, steady, not mine. I froze again. It was slow, like someone standing just behind the microphone trying not to be noticed. But it wasn't random. It had rhythm, like it knew it was being recorded. Then a whisper slipped in under it. My name. Not clearly spoken, more like remembered. Curran. I flinched so hard I knocked my chair back slightly. No one at the facility knew I was here alone, not even dispatch. My assignment was private clearance, field confirmation only. So who was saying my name inside a file that shouldn't even exist? I scrubbed forward in the footage. The cabin changed. Not in a jump, not in a cut. It just became occupied. Now I was sitting at the table, head down, hands shaking slightly, like I was writing something I didn't want to write. The handwriting on the paper was mine. I zoomed in. The words were legible. If you are watching this, you already stayed too long. My stomach tightened. I didn't remember writing that. The camera angle shifted slightly in the next frame, like something had adjusted it, or something had leaned closer to watch. And then I saw it. Behind me, standing near the doorframe. A shape. Not fully human, not fully wrong either, just off in the way it held still, like it had learned stillness by copying people who were afraid. The face wasn't visible, but I knew it was looking at me through the camera. And that was when I realized something worse. The camera wasn't just recording the cabin. It was recording me, even when I wasn't there yet. I stood up without thinking and looked around my real room. Same gray walls, same humming server lights, same isolation station in the research bunker. Nothing was behind me, but I didn't feel relieved, because the footage still showed it behind me. Even now, I whispered, "This is impossible." The audio in the file answered me instantly. A delay of less than a second. No, just one word. Flat calm. Not distorted. Human. I shut the system down. Or I tried to. The terminal froze halfway through the command. The screen flickered instead, and the video resumed on its own. Now the cabin was brighter, fire in the stove, snow visible through the window. And I was closer to the camera. Closer than before. My face in the footage lifted slowly, like I was listening to something just outside the frame. Then I smiled. I don't smile like that. It wasn't mine. The smile held too long, too still. Then the version of me in the video spoke. "They're teaching you in layers." My throat went dry. I stepped back instinctively. The recording continued. "You think you're watching an archive," it said, voice calm like mine. "But the archive is watching what you become." The word "become" hit harder than anything else. Because suddenly, I remembered something I hadn't thought about before this assignment. The request form I signed wasn't normal. There was a line I couldn't explain remembering. Subject continuity required for observation loop integrity. At the time, I thought it was just bureaucratic nonsense. Now it didn't feel like nonsense anymore. The footage shifted again. This time, I wasn't in the cabin. It was empty again. But the camera was still rolling. And the door opened. Slowly. From the inside. No wind. No force. Just a hand pushing it open from somewhere behind the frame. I felt my chest tighten, because I knew what I was about to see before it appeared. Me, standing in the doorway, watching the camera, watching myself watching it. It felt like my mind split slightly, like two versions of me were trying to occupy the same thought. The one on screen stepped forward and whispered, "You already recorded tomorrow. You just haven't lived it yet." I turned away from the monitor. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing too fast, trying to anchor myself in the real room. I counted objects: door, chair, light, wall, anything that didn't feel like it could change when I wasn't looking. But behind me, the speaker crackled again. The footage hadn't stopped. It never stops. Now the camera showed me leaving the cabin. Except I hadn't left yet. Not in real life. But in the recording, I was already walking into the snowstorm outside. Slow, controlled, like I knew exactly where I was going. The cabin door closed behind me. And then the screen went dark for half a second. When it came back, the camera was outside, pointing at the cabin, recording itself. That was the moment I understood the loop. The cabin doesn't just exist in time. It records it forward. And anything recorded becomes available, reusable, repeatable. I felt a cold pressure in my ears, like the room itself was listening harder now. The audio hissed softly. Then my own voice came through again. But it wasn't speaking to me anymore. It was speaking to something inside the cabin. Something I couldn't see yet. Don't let him leave the season. I stepped closer to the screen without meaning to. Who? I whispered. The footage paused. For the first time, the system didn't glitch. It responded. A text overlay appeared on screen. Operator status, active. I blinked at it. Operator. There was no operator assigned to Pine Hollow. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. Then another line appeared underneath it. You are now viewing from inside the loop. My breath stopped, because I realized the footage wasn't showing me what had happened. It was showing me where I was supposed to be. And I was already inside it. Somewhere between the cabin, the camera, and tomorrow. The screen flickered one last time. And I saw it clearly now. The figure wasn't inside the cabin anymore. It was inside the recording. Closer than before. Learning me frame by frame. And just before the file cut out again, my own voice returned one last time, softer now, almost gentle. You'll understand when you stop trying to be the one watching. The screen went black, but the audio didn't stop. It was still breathing. Right behind me. I should have closed the file the moment I saw the warning. Instead, I opened it. That was the mistake that changed everything. The label on the corrupted data stream was simple at first. File 77B, final segment. But underneath it, someone had added a second line, hand-typed, not system-generated. Do not review the last file. I stared at it longer than I should have. My finger hovered over the trackpad. Every instinct I had told me to stop, to walk away, to report it as corrupted and leave the station. But curiosity is a strange thing in silence. It gets louder when everything else is quiet. So I clicked. The video opened slower than before, not lagging, not buffering. It felt like something was deciding whether I was allowed to see it. At first, it looked normal. The cabin, Pine Hollow, snow pressing against the windows, the stove glowing faintly in the corner. Empty. No movement. Just the same dead stillness I had seen in earlier files. But then I noticed something wrong. The camera angle wasn't inside the cabin anymore. It was facing outward. At me. My stomach tightened without warning. I leaned closer, thinking it had to be a mistake in playback, a loop, a corrupted mirror feed. But the more I watched, the more it didn't feel like footage. It felt like attention, like something on the other side of the screen was waiting for me to realize I was being seen. Then I appeared, not inside the cabin, outside the camera, standing in front of it. I froze completely. My recorded self looked exactly like me. Same jacket, same posture, same tired eyes I had right now. But I wasn't there. Not physically. Not yet. The version of me on screen slowly raised its head and looked directly into the lens. Not past it. Not through it. At it. At me. And then it spoke. You finally opened it. My throat went dry. I stepped back from the desk instinctively, like distance could undo what I was seeing. But the video kept playing. Behind the recorded me, the cabin door slowly opened from the inside. Snow drifted in without wind, and something stood just beyond the threshold. Not fully visible, just shape, presence, pressure in the air. Then my recorded self whispered again. It was never recording the cabin. The words hit too cleanly, too calmly, like I already knew them. The version of me on screen stepped closer to the camera, closer to me, and I realized something that made my hands go cold. The camera wasn't pointed at the cabin at all. It was pointed outward, from inside something else. something that looked like the cabin, but wasn't limited to it. The screen flickered. The audio changed. Not distortion, not static, breathing, but layered. Multiple breaths, different rhythms, all synchronized around one center point. Me. I tried to close the file. My cursor moved, but it didn't respond correctly. It drifted slightly off target, like the system wasn't obeying me anymore. Like something else was guiding my hand. The recorded me smiled again, but this time it wasn't calm. It was aware. You think you're reviewing footage, it said softly, but you're being reviewed. My chest tightened. I forced myself to breathe slower. Think. This was simulation, corruption, recursive playback error. It had to be. But then the background of the video shifted slightly, and I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. My own workstation. The exact one I was sitting in. From inside the footage, the camera had pulled back just enough to show it. Which meant the footage wasn't from Pine Hollow anymore. It was from here. From this room. From this moment. My vision tunneled slightly. I stood up too fast, knocking my chair back. The sound echoed louder than it should have, but the audio in the file reacted immediately. The recorded version of me turned its head toward the sound. Inside the video. Perfect timing. No delay. No error. It was reacting to me in real time. I whispered, "This is not possible." The screen answered without hesitation. Then stopped watching. A new frame loaded instantly. I hadn't clicked anything. I hadn't touched anything. The system just advanced. Now I was inside the footage. Not metaphorically. Visually. The camera showed my hands hovering over the keyboard. The exact moment I was in right now. But slightly ahead. Predictive. Like the file already knew what I was about to do before I did it. Then something worse happened. The recorded me reached out toward the camera. Slow, deliberate, and pressed a finger against the lens. The screen darkened slightly under the touch, and I felt it. Not visually, physically. A pressure in my chest, like something was touching the other side of my awareness. I stepped back again, but my body felt delayed, heavy, like reaction time itself was slowing down. The audio changed again, but this time it wasn't just voices. It was instructions. Soft, calm, direct. You are not watching the file. You are inside its observation loop. My mind resisted the words, but the room around me started to feel unfamiliar. The walls seemed slightly different, the lights slightly lower, the hum of the station slightly out of sync. Like reality was adjusting itself to match the recording. I grabbed the monitor's power cable. My instinct was simple: cut it, shut it down, end it. But before I pulled it, the recorded me spoke again. Not from the screen, from behind me. Close, too close. You'll break the loop, it said quietly, but you'll stay inside it. I stopped breathing. Slowly I turned. Nothing was there, but the screen showed me standing behind myself. Watching, waiting. The cabin footage wasn't showing Pine Hollow anymore. It was showing my room, my station, my face, all layered into one continuous feed that didn't respect location anymore. Just observer. And observed. The camera zoomed in slightly on my recorded face, and I saw something new. A second shadow behind me in the footage. Not mine. Not aligned with my movement. It leaned closer to my ear on screen and whispered something I couldn't hear at first. but the audio slowly amplified it, piece by piece, until it formed words. You were assigned to continue the observation. A pause. Then, not end it. My hands shook, because I remembered something I had ignored before. The assignment briefing didn't say, investigate. It said, resume. The screen flickered violently for the first time, and everything paused. No motion, no audio, just a single message appearing in the center of the display. Observation has transferred. My breath stopped, because the monitor reflection showed something behind me again. But this time it wasn't in the footage. It was in my real room, standing still, learning my posture, waiting for me to accept it. The file didn't crash. It stabilized, like it had finished loading something. Then my own voice came through the speakers one last time. Calm, close, final. Now you understand. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I realized the most terrifying part wasn't that the camera was recording me. It was that it had already decided I would continue watching, even after I stopped trying to look away. The screen stayed on, and for the first time, I wasn't sure which side of it I was on anymore. The listing shouldn't have existed. That was my first thought when I saw it. A cabin deep in the forest, no service zone, winter access only, and the price was almost insulting, like someone forgot a zero or didn't care if anyone lived through it. Still, I clicked it. The photos were too clean for something that cheap. Wooden cabin, white snow piled perfectly around it, smoke rising from a chimney like it was still in use. No tracks in the snow, no footprints, just silence and symmetry. That should have been my second warning. But what stopped me wasn't the cabin. It was the description. Last guest checked out early, refund not required. No explanation, no details, just that one line sitting under the listing like a bruise. I remember staring at it for a long time, waiting for it to make sense. It didn't. But I booked it anyway. That's the part I still don't understand about myself. The confirmation email came instantly. No questions asked, no verification delay, just a simple line. Access granted. I remember laughing at that, like it was some dramatic marketing trick. I wasn't laughing later. The drive took longer than it should have. Roads thinned out fast, then disappeared completely. After that, it was just snow and trees and a sky that kept getting darker even though it was that late. No signal. No map updates. Just direction and instinct. And a growing feeling that I had already driven too far to turn back. The forest didn't look alive. That's the only way I can describe it. Not dead, not peaceful. Just waiting. Like something was holding its breath under all that white silence. When I finally reached the coordinates, there was no sign, no gate, no marker. Just trees. And then the cabin appeared between them, like it had been edited into reality. No sound, no reveal, no build-up. It was just there, sitting too still, too centered, like it had always been waiting for me specifically. I parked the car and sat there for a moment with my hands still on the wheel. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe nothing. Maybe a joke. But the cabin didn't feel like a joke. It felt aware. The snow around it was untouched. No tire marks, no animal tracks, no wind disturbance. That was the first detail that made my stomach tighten. Someone should have been here. Someone should have arrived before me. But nothing had arrived here in a long time. I stepped out of the car anyway. The cold hit instantly. Not just temperature cold, something sharper, something that felt like it moved through layers of thought instead of skin. Each step toward the cabin sounded too loud. Crunch, pause, crunch. Like the forest was counting with me. There were no other sounds. No birds, no wind, no distant movement. Just my breathing, getting heavier the closer I got. The front door was already slightly open. Not wide, just enough. Like it had been waiting for me to decide whether I would push it or not. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to convince myself it was just a bad rental, a poorly managed listing, a forgotten property in winter isolation. But none of those explanations felt stable. Because of the smell. Not decay. Not mold. Something warmer. Like air that had been exhaled recently. Inside. I pushed the door. It opened without resistance. The cabin interior was smaller than the photos made it look. Everything wooden, everything arranged with strange care. A table in the center, a stove against the wall, a single chair facing inward, not toward the window. That detail bothered me more than anything else. Why would a chair face away from light? The fireplace was cold, but the ashes inside weren't fully dead. That's what I noticed next. Not fresh fire, not warmth, just recent absence of heat. Like something had been burning until very recently, and then simply stopped. No transition, no cooling process. Just stopped. I walked further in. My boots sank slightly into the wooden floor like it wasn't fully solid beneath me. That was impossible, but I felt it anyway. The table had scratches on it. Not random ones. Repeated lines. Like someone had been carving or marking time. I leaned closer without thinking. And that's when I saw them. Names. Not written. Etched. Dozens of them layered over each other so many times, the wood had turned dark and uneven. Some names repeated. Some were crossed out. Some looked unfinished, like the person stopped halfway through remembering how to write them. My own name wasn't there. Not yet. I straightened up too quickly. That was when I heard it. A soft sound behind me. Not a step. Not a door. Something closer to breath shifting in a closed room. I turned fast. Nothing. Just the chair. Still facing away from the window. Still facing inward. Like it had been waiting for me to notice it properly. I don't know why I did it. But I sat down. The moment I did, the cabin changed in a way I can't fully explain. Not physically. Not visibly, but something in the silence adjusted. Like the room acknowledged a new position had been filled. The air felt tighter, more focused. I checked my phone again. No signal. Battery dropping faster than normal. But the screen flickered once before dying, and in that flicker, I swear I saw something behind the battery icon. A shape. Standing behind me. I spun around immediately. Nothing there. Of course. But my reflection in the window didn't move quite right for half a second. Just half a second. Enough. I stood up again. Heart slightly faster now. Trying to reset myself. This is what remote cabins do to people, I told myself. Isolation, stress, expectation filling in gaps. But even as I thought it, I knew I didn't believe it. Because the cabin felt like it had expectations too. I moved toward the stove. That's when I noticed the second chair. I hadn't seen it before. It wasn't there in the photos. It was positioned directly behind where I had been sitting. Perfectly aligned. Like it had always been there. Like I was the one who had moved into its place. My throat went dry. I didn't sit again. Instead, I backed toward the door slowly. Careful. Listening. The cabin stayed quiet. Too quiet. Then just before I reached the door handle, I heard it. My voice. From somewhere inside the walls. Soft. Close. Not speaking words. Just breathing my name. Like it had been practiced. Like it had been waiting to get it right. I froze. The sound stopped instantly. And in that silence, I realized something I didn't want to accept. The listing wasn't cheap because it was unwanted. It was cheap because it wasn't unoccupied. It was already in use. And I wasn't the first guest. I was just the next one still inside. The door behind me clicked. Not opening. Locking. And from the cabin interior, very softly, the chair shifted against the wood. Like someone had just sat down again. Even though I was still standing. The message arrived before I even opened the door. No notification sound. No vibration. Just a glowing text on a black screen that wasn't there a second ago. Check-in complete. Do not leave the cabin after dark. I stood outside the cabin, snow falling straight and quiet, like the sky had forgotten how to move properly. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Something about the message already felt aware of me. Behind me, the forest was still, too still. And that was the first thing that felt wrong. Because forests don't stay quiet like that. Not when wind is passing through them. Not when animals are alive inside them. But this one was listening instead of moving. I pushed the cabin door open. It groaned like it had been waiting for me to do that for a long time. Inside, warmth hit my face. Not natural warmth. More like stale heat trapped inside walls for months. The kind that feels borrowed, not real. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Welcome back, ARJUN. I froze. My name. I never typed my name anywhere during booking. The listing didn't even ask for it. Just dates and payment. I turned slowly, scanning the empty cabin. One bed, one table, one old stove, one window facing the trees. Nothing moved. Still, I felt like I had walked into someone else's pause. My phone buzzed again. You look tired. I exhaled sharply. Okay, what the hell? I typed back fast. Who is this? The reply came instantly. You already know. My stomach tightened. That was impossible. This was just a remote rental system. Automated check-in, digital keys, maybe a glitch, maybe someone hacked it. I told myself that, but my hands didn't believe me. Because the next message didn't feel like code. It felt like a thought being finished for me. You always think it's a glitch first. I dropped my phone onto the bed like it burned me. Silence filled the room again, but it wasn't empty silence. It felt focused, like the cabin was now aware I had arrived. I walked to the window. Snow pressed against the glass in slow waves. Outside, the trees stood like black pillars. No movement, no life. Then my phone lit up again on the bed behind me. I didn't want to look, but I did. Don't turn around when you hear the stove. I laughed once, a short broken sound. No stove is even on. Then, click, from behind me. Metal shifting. Slow, like something inside the wall had just decided to wake up. My breath stopped halfway in my chest. I didn't turn, not yet. Instead, I listened. Click again. Then a faint hiss, like gas or air pushing through old pipes. The stove. It wasn't supposed to be active. The listing said it hadn't been used in years. But I could hear it now, breathing. My phone vibrated again. Good, you're learning. My fingers went cold. I turned slowly anyway. The stove was in the corner. Old iron, rusted edges, door shut. But there was light inside it. Not firelight. Something deeper. Like the stove wasn't burning wood, it was burning attention. I stepped closer without meaning to. And that's when the next message came. Not on the screen this time. From the stove itself. A soft crackle. Then a voice. Not loud. Not even fully formed. Just close. Don't stand too close, ARJUN. I stumbled back. My shoulder hit the table. Wood scraped loudly across the floor. My phone lit up again. Thank you for LISTNING. My throat went dry. This isn't real, I whispered. It's not real. But the cabin didn't respond to that. Instead, the window fogged up from the inside. Slowly, like someone had exhaled on it from the other side. And then wrote something. Finger-traced letters in the frost. I didn't want to read it, but my body did anyway. We don't need you to believe, only to stay. My legs moved before I thought. I grabbed my jacket and rushed to the door. Locked. I hadn't locked it. I was sure I hadn't. I pulled harder. The handle didn't move. Behind me, the stove clicked again. Like something inside it had shifted position. My phone vibrated nonstop now. Messages stacking. Fast. Too fast. You checked in. You accepted TRMS. You are inside now. I slammed my fist against the door. Open it. Nothing. Only the sound of my own voice bouncing back at me like it didn't belong to me. Then, a pause. A longer silence. My phone stopped vibrating. For the first time since I arrived. Hope flickered small, weak, stupid. Then the final message arrived. One line. Different tone. Not cold. Not mechanical. Almost careful. ARJUN, why did you come back here? I froze. My hand slowly lowered from the door. I didn't type for a long time. Because I didn't have an answer. At least not one I wanted to admit. But the cabin waited. The stove dimmed slightly, like it was listening harder now. The forest outside pressed against the windows like a face leaning in. Finally, I typed. I've never been here before. The reply took longer this time. Too long. Then, that's not true. My heartbeat rose. I typed again faster. I don't know this place. I booked it yesterday. Another pause. Then the stove flickered. A soft glow pulsed inside it. And the message came back. You always say that on the first night. My breath broke. I stepped away from the door slowly, like the wood itself might remember me if I touched it too long. What is this place? I whispered. The phone lit again. But this time, no message. Just a single image. A grainy frame. Black and white. The cabin. Same cabin. But older. And inside it, a man sitting at the table. Facing the camera. Me. My knees weakened. No, I said, shaking my head. No, that's not possible. But the image didn't change. And then a second frame appeared. Same man. Same cabin. But this time, he was looking at something behind him. His face was pale. Like he had just understood something too late. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor hard. The screen didn't break. It just kept glowing. From the stove, a soft voice again. Closer now. Not from inside it. From behind it. You'll do better this time. I turned slowly. The stove door was open now. I swear it wasn't before. Inside wasn't fire. It was darkness shaped like heat. And in that darkness, something was moving. Not violently, patiently, like it had done this before, like it had been waiting for me to notice it properly. My phone, still on the floor, lit up one last time. A final message. No tone, no system formatting. Just words. Don't worry, ARJUN. This is only your second check-in. The stove clicked shut, and the cabin went quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel empty. It felt reset, like something inside me had already agreed to stay longer than I remembered. I stopped trusting my own thoughts the moment the walls shifted. Not slowly, not like dust settling or wood expanding in cold. It happened the instant I remembered the word door. The wall in front of me twitched, like it had heard me. Then it changed shape. A thin crack appeared in the wood where there was none before. A perfect outline. A door. I didn't move, because I hadn't walked toward it. I hadn't touched anything. I had only thought about leaving. And the cabin answered that thought. My mouth went dry. "This is not happening," I whispered. But the door stayed there, waiting, like it had always been part of the wall, just waiting for me to remember it. Behind me, the stove clicked once. A soft metal sound, like a reminder. I turned slowly. It was still closed, but warmer now. Too warm, like something inside had shifted position again. My phone lay on the table, screen cracked from the fall earlier. It lit up without sound. One message: "Don't test the walls." I laughed under my breath. A short, broken laugh. Test them? I didn't do anything. But even as I said it, I understood something I didn't want to understand. The cabin wasn't reacting to actions. It was reacting to awareness, to memory, to fear. I took one step back. The wall behind me rippled, just slightly, like fabric tightening. I froze, because I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even looked at it properly. But I had thought about where I might run if the door didn't work. And now, there was a narrow hallway there, leading deeper into the cabin, where there was no hallway before. My breathing turned shallow. "No," I said. "No, no, no." I turned away fast. The hallway stayed. I didn't look back again. My phone buzzed. Another message. "It is easier if you stop. RESISTING formation." I sat down on the bed because my legs stopped listening. The mattress sank too deeply, like it was trying to hold me. I stared at the floor. Wood panels. Simple. Normal. But even that felt wrong now, because I couldn't remember if the floor had always been this dark, or if I had only just noticed it. And that thought alone made my chest tight. The cabin wasn't just changing. It was reorganizing itself around what I noticed, around what I feared. I pressed my palms into my face. Okay, think," I whispered. But the moment I tried to think clearly, the cabin reacted again. A soft creak behind me. I turned slowly. The bed was no longer centered. It had shifted closer to the hallway, closer to the new space that didn't exist before. Like the room itself was leaning toward it. Like gravity had changed its mind. My phone lit again. "You are making it worse" by OBSRVNG IT in PICES. I frowned. What does that even mean? No answer came. Only silence. Heavy, patient. Then the hallway changed. I swear I saw it. The entrance widened slightly. Not physically. Not in a way I could prove. But it felt more real than the rest of the room now. Like the cabin had decided where I should focus. and everything else was fading because I wasn't paying attention to it. I stood up slowly. My heart was beating too loud. I tried to ignore everything except the stove, the bed, the table, the door I first saw. I forced my mind to hold those shapes steady. And for a moment, nothing changed. Relief flickered. Small, weak. Then the stove clicked again. And the relief died. Because I realized something terrible. The cabin wasn't just reacting to fear. It was reacting to attention itself. Whatever I focused on became more real. And everything else started to dissolve. I looked at the table. It looked normal, but I didn't trust it anymore. So I looked away. And immediately, the sound of wood shifting came from it. Like it had lost importance. Like it was waiting for me to decide if it still existed. My throat tightened. "Stop this," I said. "Stop doing that." But the cabin didn't argue. It obeyed. Because the hallway behind me grew darker. Stronger. More defined. I didn't want to look at it. But I felt it becoming the only stable thing left in the room. My phone vibrated again. Good. URSTRTING to see structure. I shook my head. This isn't structure. This is wrong. But even as I said it, I noticed something worse. The hallway wasn't just appearing. It was stabilizing. Like the more I resisted it, the more clearly it formed. As if resistance was just another kind of attention. I closed my eyes. Tried to block everything out. No cabin. No hallway. No stove. Just black. For a few seconds it worked. Silence returned. No shifting. No creaks. Just my breath. Then, a whisper. Very close. Not from outside. From memory itself. "Why are you afraid of the hallway, Arjun?" My eyes snapped open. I hadn't spoken. I hadn't moved. But the hallway was gone. Completely gone. The wall was back. Solid wood. No trace of anything else. My breath shook. "What?" I whispered. Then my phone lit up again. One final message. Longer this time. Not cold. Not mechanical. Almost tired. "You removed it by forgetting it. But it will come back when you remember why it was there." I stared at the wall. My mind felt fragile now. Like any thought could rebuild the thing I just erased. And worse, I had no idea what I had just erased. The cabin wasn't just reading me. It was storing me. Rewriting itself every time I focused too long on something. Every fear became architecture. Every memory became structure. Every hesitation became a room. I stepped back slowly, afraid of thinking too clearly, afraid of thinking at all. The stove clicked again behind me, but I didn't turn this time, because I understood something now. The cabin didn't need me to act. It only needed me to notice. And I had already noticed too much. My phone dimmed. The last message faded. But just before the screen went black, one line appeared again. Smaller, almost hidden. "Don't try to remember what you built here before." And for the first time, I wasn't sure if the cabin was warning me, or protecting itself from what I might recall next. The message didn't arrive like the others. It didn't light up the screen. It replaced it. My phone went dark for half a second, then turned white. Not with an app. Not with a notification. With a single line, centered like it had always belonged there. "You already checked out, ARJUN." My throat tightened. "No," I whispered. That's not possible. I looked around the cabin fast, like the room itself might confirm I was still here. The stove sat quiet. Too quiet. The hallway I had erased earlier was gone again. But now that felt worse, because I couldn't trust that it was truly gone. I stepped back slowly. My heel hit something. I looked down. A suitcase. My suitcase. I hadn't brought one. I was sure of it. But it was there, sitting perfectly beside the bed, like it had always been part of the room's memory. My hand shook as I touched it. Warm, freshly handled. Inside, I knew there would be things that didn't belong to me. But I opened it anyway, because my body was already past the point of arguing with logic. Clothes folded neatly. A jacket I didn't own. A second phone charger I never packed. And at the bottom, a printed check-in receipt. My name, my face, date of arrival. But the departure line was filled in. Not by me. It read, checked out same night. My stomach dropped. No, I didn't leave, I said out loud. I'm here, I'm still here. My phone buzzed again. This time slower. Heavier. Like the cabin itself was tired of explaining. You left, you always leave. I backed away from the suitcase. No, I just got here, The stove clicked. Not loud. Just enough. Like a reminder being corrected. My eyes snapped to it. And that's when I saw it. A shadow inside the stove door glass. Not fire. Not smoke. A reflection. Me. But not me sitting. Me standing at the door. Leaving. Carrying the suitcase. Walking out into the snow. I stumbled back. That's not real, I said quickly. That's not. My phone interrupted me. You are watching the part where you leave, again. My breathing turned shallow. I looked at the window. Snow outside. Same trees. Same silence. But now I saw something new in it. Footprints. Leading away from the cabin. Fresh. Like someone had just walked out. And the terrifying part. They matched my boots. I wasn't moving. But something about me had already moved. I pressed my palm against my head. Okay, think, I whispered. Think clearly. But thinking clearly was exactly what made it worse. Because I started remembering things I hadn't experienced. Standing outside. Locking the door behind me. Feeling relieved. Getting into a car that didn't exist here. And each memory felt real. Not imagined. Not false. Just misplaced. My phone lit again. You confuse time with attention. I swallowed hard. What does that even mean? The cabin answered without sound. The walls tightened. Just slightly. Like they were leaning closer. And suddenly, I understood something I didn't want to understand. The cabin wasn't recording time. It was recording versions of me. Different choices. Different exits. Different endings. And I was seeing them all at once. My suitcase shifted slightly on its own. Just a small movement. Like it was deciding whether I should notice it again. I didn't want to look inside anymore. But I did. At the top of the clothes now. A photograph. I didn't put it there. I swear I didn't. I picked it up. My hands went cold instantly. It showed me outside the cabin. But older. Tired. Standing in snow up to my knees. Looking directly at the camera. And behind me, the cabin door was open. And someone else was standing inside. Watching me leave. My vision blurred for a second. No, 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 no. I dropped the photo. It didn't fall. It stayed suspended midair for half a second, before landing softly like it had chosen the timing. My phone buzzed again. You always look surprised when you see your exit. I laughed once. It came out wrong. Broken. I didn't exit, I said. I'm still here. The cabin didn't argue. It just showed me more. The stove flickered. The flame inside it appeared for the first time. Not orange. Not normal. More like light trying to remember color. And in that flame, a voice. Mine. But older. Calmer. Tired in a way I hadn't earned yet. It's easier the second time you leave. I stumbled back so fast I hit the wall. The wall didn't feel like wood anymore. It felt like a screen. Like everything in the cabin had stopped being physical and started being recorded. My phone changed again. Now it showed a profile page. Not an app I recognized. Just a system interface. And my name at the top. ARJUNS. Below it, status currently staying. My heart stopped for a moment. Then, it updated. Slowly, like it was correcting itself. Status currently LEAVING. I shook my head violently. No, no, I'm not leaving. I'm right here. But even as I said it, the floor under me shifted slightly, like it was preparing to support movement. My legs felt heavy, not tired, preloaded, like my body was already mid-action in another version of this moment. My phone buzzed one last time. Long message. Not cold anymore. Almost gentle. You don't remember staying because staying is not what you notice. Only LEAVING is recorded clearly. I stared at the screen. My reflection stared back behind the text. But something was wrong with it. It wasn't matching my breathing. It was one step ahead. Always one step ahead. The cabin creaked softly, and I understood the final piece too late. There was no arrival here. Only continuations. Only versions of me cycling through decisions I didn't fully witness. And every time I paid attention, I collapsed into the version that noticed it the most. The suitcase closed itself. Slowly, like it had finished its job. The stove dimmed. The hallway flickered at the edge of perception again, like it was waiting for me to choose it without thinking. My phone gave one last message. No system tone. No formatting. Just words that felt almost personal now. You can't stop reading this version of you now. My breathing shook, because I realized I wasn't inside a cabin anymore. I was inside a record of myself staying too long. And somewhere outside this version, another me was already leaving.